Today, you are going to build a full stack Next.js application using Next.js, Supabase, as well as Tailwind CSS. And here is our finished application here just to show you what we're going to build. So we are going to build and deploy this application in which a user can basically see this login page and then they can log in. And it's going to be a photo storage application. So we're going to use storage buckets in Supabase to add and remove photos from those storage buckets. We're going to add the ability to favorite photos and go to a favorites page, remove favorites using Supabase databases, writing SQL and different things like that. So this is going to be a full stack application with authentication, databases, storage buckets. It's going to be a super fun tutorial. So let me show you. I'm going to just sign in here and then click sign in. And then once signed in, what we're going to see is some different photos here, in which I have a few different photos. And here is a cute little dog named Bentley. He's all ready for Halloween, although that was a couple months ago now. But basically, you can upload these different photos. So let me upload another one here, and it opens this file opener. And then let's just go ahead and open, I don't know, this photo of this watch here. So it's going to upload this photo. We see it right here. And then when you click on a photo, you see this nice modal pop up. This is me and my dog, Ragnar, going on a little hike there. And then we can, of course, close this modal. And then we can heart these photos. And then you'll see the heart gets filled in here. Same thing here. The heart's going to get filled in. And then we should be able to go to favorites. And then we should see our favorite photos right here. And then if we come back to our photos, let's go ahead and, I'll delete the Rolex. Since I don't want to, these other photos are actually pretty good. I'll delete this one as well. So we can add and delete photos and then come back to favorites. We should now just see these two photos since we deleted the other ones, which we do. And then of course, we can indeed sign out, sign in with different users, sign up and do a whole bunch of different things. So you're going to learn a ton in this tutorial. Try to hang in there, try to do as much as you can by yourself, or maybe watch me do it and then go do it by yourself to really test your knowledge and to learn more things. But we're going to build and deploy this full stack Next.js application. So let's get started. So I'm here within VS Code, and the first thing that we're going to do is just create a new Next.js application. So I'm going to run npx create-next-app at latest. Now, once I create this, I will show you my package.json file so you can see the specific versions, or even better yet, I'll have this project linked to my GitHub here so you can check out the final project and you can check out what versions I'm using. So if you're running into like any weird issues or weird errors, it could be because the versioning isn't the same. So it would probably be best if you make sure to pin your versions to the same versions that I'm using here. But I'm going to just call this application, let's go with photo-store. And then I'm not going to use TypeScript, but feel free to use TypeScript if you're comfortable with that. I'm not going to use ESLint. I am going to use Tailwind CSS, no SRC directory, and we are going to use the app router. And we are not going to customize the default import alias. So it's going to create this project here. And then I'm going to go up to my Finder and I'm going to go File, Open, and then open this within VS Code. So I've opened up the new project here, and I'm just going to close this welcome page. And the first things that we're going to do here are just kind of setting up our Supabase connection, as we're going to use Supabase to store our photos in Supabase buckets. And then we're also going to use Supabase. We're going to create a table that is going to allow us to have a feature to where users can favorite a photo and see their favorite photos and stuff like that. So let's head over to the Supabase dashboard here. So I'm just at supabase.com and I'm going to go to dashboard. You may need to sign up for a Supabase account. It's very straightforward. It's completely free, but this might say like sign up for you instead of just going to dashboard. But sign up for free and then head to the dashboard. So I'm going to click on this here, and then I'm going to go new project, and I'm going to pick my organization, and then I'm going to just call this photo-store. I'm going to type in a password here, and then for my region, that looks good enough here. Just pick whatever region is going to be closest to you. And then I'm going to click create new project. So It'll take a second, but I'll catch up with you once this project is created. So it's still setting up my project here, as you can see right here, but it is giving me my kind of public anon key here, as well as a URL. And we are going to need both of those. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to our application and we're going to create a .env.local file. Now, when you create this, make sure that you set this up in your root of your project. So it should not be within your app folder. It should be on the same level as your Next.js config, package.json, so on and so forth. So I'm going to call this .env.local. And then within this file, we're going to create two different environment variables that are going to allow us to connect to Supabase. Now, I'm probably going to delete this project within Supabase once I get done with this. So I'm probably going to just show you all of my .env keys, but you should make sure to not, make any of those public unless you play to just delete your project like what I'm going to do. But I'm going to do next public Supabase underscore URL. And then I'm also going to do next underscore public underscore Supabase, and it's going to be ANON key. And now let's head back to Supabase. And it looks like it has completed setting up this project now, which is great. But to find our API keys here, what we need to do is, I believe I need to go to maybe settings here. And then if I go to API, I'm going to see my URL here. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to head back. I'm going to paste that in my .env file. And then I'm going to come back to Supabase. I'm going to go to this anon public. I'm going to click copy. And then I'm going to come back and paste that in to my next public anon key or whatever we need here. So yeah, we have those in place. So now this basically allowed us to set or connect our project to Supabase. Now, there are a couple of different things that we still have to do here. So for one, we need to install some Supabase helpers. We're going to install a couple different packages. So in previous projects, we've installed like an Auth helpers package, but Supabase has changed their libraries a bit. So it's actually going to be npm install. It's going to be at Supabase /SSR for server-side rendering. So we're going to install this. And then we're also going to install npm install at Supabase /Supabase-JS. I'm going to install that package. And I think that's all we should need to install for now. But of course, I will, as we run into errors, as I always inevitably do, we will make some updates there. But let's now open up our app folder. And right now, if you're not super familiar with Next.js, maybe you're still learning it, but just as a reminder, within a folder, within this app folder, anytime you create a page.js or JSX or TS file, it is going to create a public route. So at the root of our app, so within our app folder, this root page.js. So when I say root, I mean it's not within any other folders. This is going to be our home page by default. So if I click on this, it's going to have all this templated kind of Next.js stuff here by default. Now, we're not really going to want any of this. So I'm going to actually just remove everything within here and just have it like so. And I'm also going to change this to a page.jsx file, as I have the plugin emit abbreviations, which is going to give me autocomplete, but it seems to only work for me with a JSX file. But what I'm going to do here is for our root page, I'm going to have a main tag. And within this main tag, what I'm going to do is we're basically just going to have like a welcome page that says like, I don't know, welcome to photo store. I don't know, welcome to the image storage application, something along those lines. I'm not going to put too much thought into it. You can, of course, change the name how you want, but it's just going to welcome the user and then just say, hey, you can sign in now to save your favorite photos. And then we're going to allow them to, of course, sign in or sign up or whatever they want to do. So within this main tag, I'm going to render another div. And then within this div, I'm going to render an H2. And this is just going to say, welcome to, and let's just call it photo store, as they're going to be able to store photos here, have a public URL for it, and then they're going to be able to favorite photos and so on and so forth. Within this, let's put a paragraph under this. And for this paragraph, let's go ahead and say, sign in to upload and save your favorite photos. And I think that's all we really need for that. And then eventually we're going to have a component here that is going to be like an authorization form to where they can sign in, sign up, so on and so forth. But for now, this is all we're going to have. Now, I have created the styles that I want for this homepage already. So if you go to my GitHub, you can see the styles I have because I'm going to push this project. So go ahead and copy and paste the styles if you want. If you want to do them yourself with Tailwind, you can definitely do so. But I just think it gets really tedious to go through and style every little thing by hand, especially when, styling. You can ask ChatGPT to style this page if you really want to. I really just want to focus more so on the functionality between Next.js, Supabase, uploading images, saving images in the database, and creating like a legit full stack application. It's not a crazy huge full stack application, but with storing photos, uploading photos, saving stuff in a database, you're reading, updating all this stuff. So that's what you do in, any large scale applications anyways. So with that, I'm going to add the styles in here. So since this is a Tailwind CSS application, I'm going to add some styles here to this main tag, and I'm going to go ahead and just add all the styles to the rest of this and see you in just a second. All right, so I have all the styles here. So now let's go ahead and start our application. So I'm going to do npm run dev, and it should start our application up on localhost 3000. And if I go, you should see our application. So as you can see, it's got some okay styles, nothing too riveting here. Similar styles that I tend to use for most of my projects, but just like a simple, straightforward dark mode here to where welcome to photo store and then sign in to upload and save your favorite photos. So we are now going to need to go ahead and set up this authorization form. So let's head back to VS Code and I'm going to close this. And what we're going to do is create a new folder and we're going to call this components. And we're going to have several different components that we use throughout our entire application. And we are going to store them within this components folder. So the first component that we're going to create is going to be a new file. And then this is just going to be auth form.jsx. Now within auth form.jsx here, it is going to be a somewhat larger component because this is where we're going to have all of our logic for signing in, signing up, and making different requests and setting up our Supabase client and so on and so forth. Now, since this is going to be a form that the user kind of types in and submits things, we are going to use a client component. By default in Next.js, they are going to be server components at the start, which effectively means that they are going to be run within Node.js on the server. Now, we don't always want that because sometimes if we want the user to interact with our web page and we want to handle different events, so clicking on a button or something like that, then we need to do some work client side. And that's what we're doing for this form. So to make sure that this is actually a client component, so it's, interactive on the client, we're going to make this use client at the top of this file. And then what we're going to do is export default function auth form. Now this form, let's go ahead and just set up the HTML first. And then once we set up the HTML, then we will start adding the logic for handle login, handle sign up, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and I'm going to return, and I'm going to provide the styles for you if you'd like, but we're going to have a form here, and we're not going to use an action since we're not using server actions, but we are going to do an on submit. Now, the on submit is going to depend on whether it's a new user or if it's not a new user. So we also need some logic to track if it's a new user or if it's not a new user. So to do that, we are going to set up some state for this auth form. So I'm going to say const is new user, comma set is new user is equal to use state. And I'm going to import that from React there. And then we're going to set this to false by default. And then within our form here, we'll of course eventually add the logic for setting our is new user, but we're going to say the on submit is equal to, well, we're going to check if it's a new user, then what do we want to do? Well, we want to call a function that handles signing up. So we're going to call handle sign up. Is sign up one word or two words? I don't even know. We'll keep it like this. And then if that's not true, well, if it's not a new user, then they just need to log in. So we'll just call handle login. So now we need to, let's just skeleton out the functions for the handle sign up as well as handle login. Now, I generally like to just do function definitions, but you can make this an arrow function as well. It's really going to be the same difference, but this will be an async function. So I'm going to do async function, and then it is going to be titled handle sign up. And then within the handle sign up function, it's going to take an event, and then we're going to call event.prevent default. So it doesn't just automatically submit the form. And then we are also going to do some stuff within this sign up. Eventually, this is where we'll create our Supabase client, and we will sign a user up in Supabase. But for now, we're just going to skeleton out the function. And then let's also create a async function called handle login that takes an event. And then we are also going to call event.prevent default to make sure it doesn't submit it. And then we're going to handle login. And I forgot to just handle sign up here. So that was a lot, but basically we're going to have a form here in which when they submit the form, if it's a new user, we're going to sign them up. If it's not a new user, they're just going to get logged in. And now within this form, we need to add some different inputs. So the first input is going to be of type email, because they're going to type in an email and password for us. And I'm going to put these on separate lines. And these are all going to be controlled components. So I will have a value here, which is equal to email, which also means we need another piece of state here. So I'm going to say const email, comma set email is equal to use state and initialize it to an empty string. And then we're going to set the value of this input to our email piece of state here. We're going to say the on change is going to accept an event. And then what we're going to do is we're going to want to set our email, and that is going to be to our event.target.value. So what's going on here is when the user types in their email, every single character they type is going to trigger this on change event for this input. And then once that on change event is triggered, we are going to capture the event. The event is automatically going to be passed into this function. This is just like a basic kind of HTML thing that occurs. And then we're going to take that event, and we need to get the value of the input. And that's going to be on the event.target.value. That's the property that the value is going to be. And then we're going to set the email right here to whatever the user is typing in, which is going to set it to the value of this input here. Let's also do a placeholder, and this is just going to be email. And then I'll also we'll add some class names here in just a second, but I'll just leave that as kind of a bit of a placeholder as well. But now below this, we're going to do another input, but this is now going to be a password. And I'm going to put these on separate lines as well. And it's going to be very similar to what we did above. The value is going to be equal to a password. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do Option Shift down arrow, which is going to create, just like duplicate this line down. But we're going to call this password. And then I'm going to call this set password, and we're going to initialize it to an empty string. And then for this on change, I'm guessing you know where I'm going with this. We're going to accept the on change, pass in an inline function here, accept the event, and then we need to set the password to the event.target.value. And then we're also going to have some class names here as well that I'm just going to leave empty for now. And then the placeholder here is just going to be password. And then below these two inputs, this is where we are going to put our button here. So it's going to be of a button, but it's going to be of type submit. So I didn't fully understand this like right when I was starting, but within a form element, when you set a button to type submit and it's within a form, that is what's going to trigger your on submit for your form. So since this button is of type submit, when they click on this button right here, that's going to trigger this on submit for my form. So this is going to be a button of type submit. And let's go ahead, and this should either say sign in or sign up, depending on whether it is a new user or not. So let's go ahead, and we might also want to do something like, if they're currently signing in, maybe we just change this button to signing in instead of sign in. So let's go ahead here, and below this handle sign up, let's do a variable that just says let sign in message is equal to sign in. But then let's say like if they are signing in, so I'm going to create another piece of state here called is signing in. Then we want to set the sign in message to equal signing in. But if that's not true, else if they are a new user, then what we want to do is set the sign in message to equal sign up. So if they're signing in, set this button to just say signing in. If they are a new user, then set the sign in message to be sign up. And then for our submit button, we can just say, this should be our sign in message. Now we do need to create the state for is signing in. So let's go ahead and set const is signing in and set is signing in is use state false. And then within our login function, as well as probably our sign up function, maybe we should have said is signing in or signing up, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Maybe we could do separate state for is signing up, I guess, but like I said, we'll figure that out as we go. So with that in place, that should set this sign in message here. Now, what we're going to want to do is basically ask the user, okay, do you already have an account? If you do already have an account, then go ahead and click sign up. And that will basically change our state as well to they are a new user. So below this button, and I'll still do this within this form. I still think that's fairly appropriate. Let's go ahead and do a p tag here. And within this paragraph, let's go ahead and we will basically say if they are in is new user state, then this paragraph should say already have an account, click here to sign in. But if it's not a new user, then this paragraph should say don't have an account, then click here to sign up. So let's just go ahead. I guess we can do this right within our JSX here. Open up curly braces. So we are entering JavaScript land. I'm going to do is new user question mark. Then I want to render. I'm going to open up parentheses here. And then I'm going to render a React fragment. And I'm going to just say already have an account question mark. And then let's put a space here and render out a button that says, and we'll set the type is equal to button, not type submit, just type of button. Then we will say sign in. So if they already have an account, click on this button to sign in. But when they click on this button, what we're going to want to do, and let me push this to a new line here. When they click sign in, what we want to do is then we want to set this on click. We want to now set our set is new user to false, because if they already have an account, then they're not a new user. So we need to set new user to false. So I think that's all we need here, but then we need to finish. So I'm going to put colon. So we're still in our ternary operator. I'm going to be honest. This is not the nicest way to do this. Like, this doesn't look super readable, but I also don't think it looks too terrible. Like, I've definitely seen it and probably written worse code here, but generally avoiding ternary operators is probably not the worst idea because they're not always super readable. But I don't know. I don't think they get a bad rap. I also don't think they're always super bad. But basically, let's just copy all of this right here and paste it. So instead of saying already have an account, let's say don't have an account. Then we need to set is new user to true. And then instead of saying signing in, this should say sign up. And I think that is about all we need to do here. Now, we're also going to probably want some state here that says, like, if they're signing up, then maybe we show them a signing up message, because what's going to happen here is if they click sign up, they're going to get a email to their email that says confirm sign up, just like you always get. So what we'll do here is I am going to need state that is signing up, but I'm going to do is signing up. If that's true, then I want to let's render just a sign up message. So we'll create that as well, a sign up message. So what I'm saying here is if they're signing up, then render the sign up message. And this double ampersand sign is basically saying, if this is false, then return null. But if this is true, before the ampersand signs, if this is true, then return whatever is beyond the ampersand signs. So if this is true, ampersand, return our sign up message. If this is false, it returns null and it doesn't render out anything. So for our sign up message, we'll just create a constant here called const sign up message. And, you could create this outside of our component here because it's not going to be dynamic at all. And that would be just fine. You wouldn't reinitialize this constant on every re-render, which, you could argue is maybe better for performance, but we're not going to see any real difference here in performance for our application. So we're not going to prematurely optimize this, but it's just going to be a paragraph that says email sent, check your email to confirm sign up. And then I'll also add some classes to this here in a second. So with all of this in place, apart from our styles, we have I need to add this state here as well. So let's go ahead. I'm going to option shift down arrow, and I'm going to change this to is signing up and set is signing up. And now we have that state. And then when they're signing up, I'll make sure to set is signing up to true. So with this in place, we've kind of skeletoned out this entire form here pretty well. But now the only other thing I believe that I want to do here is add the different class names to this so it doesn't look completely ugly. Now, we can actually probably go look at this right now and just see, oh wait, I'm not rendering our auth form. So within our page.jsx, let's now render our auth form right here. And yes, this homepage here, it is going to be a server component, but we can render client components within server components with no issues. So I'm going to go ahead and render out my auth form, imported from components auth form. We're going to render that here. And now if we look at it, we see this auth form we added. I know it looks like we added a bunch of code to really not see that much on our page, but now let's add some styles here so it doesn't look like, pretty disgusting, which is how it looks now. So let's head back to VS Code. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to my auth form again, and I'm basically just going to copy and paste the styles that I've already created here. So you can do the same, or you could write them out manually, use ChatGPT, whatever kind of you want to do here. So I've gone ahead now and added a class name to my sign up message, to our on submit here, to both of our inputs, as well as the button here, as well as this paragraph and these buttons down here below. And that is about it. So now if we go back, we see it looks, I think anyways, a ton better here. So now with this in place, what we should be able to do is set up our Supabase methods for signing in a user as well as signing up a user. So let's go ahead and head back to VS Code, and we will now implement that now. What we're going to need to do is we're going to have to implement this sign up form first, because to have any users to test with, we're going to need to have a user in our database here. So effectively, what we're going to have to do is call something along the lines of like supabase.auth.signup. And we're going to sign them up with the email as well as the password. Now, we need to add a way to kind of connect to Supabase to be able to access the Supabase client. So the way that we're going to do this is within our app folder. Let's create another folder. I'm going to call this utils, I guess. You could also call this maybe like Supabase utils, because I think everything in here is going to be pretty specific to Supabase. So that's potentially an even better name here, but we're going to just call this utils. And then within our utils folder, we're going to create a new file. And then I'm going to call this Supabase client.js. And then all we need to do here is create a connection to Supabase. So I'm going to make this a client component, use client, and we're going to import create browser client right here from @Supabase/SSR. So we're going to import that create browser client function. And then I'm going to say const Supabase is equal to create browser client, that function that we just imported. We're going to call that function by adding the parentheses, and we're going to pass in two arguments. The first is going to be our next public Supabase URL, which is going to exist on our process.env.next_, and screw it. Let's just go to .env.local. And I'm going to go to next public Supabase URL. I'm going to copy this, head back, and it's going to be that there. So the first argument is process.env next public Supabase URL. And then below this, it's going to be process.env. And this is going to be the other one, next public Supabase anon key. Copy that, paste that there. So this is going to basically create a Supabase client with our credentials for our Supabase application that we have here in the web browser here. So let's go back. And then all we need to do here is export Supabase. So like we could have just created this client like in our auth form component here. That would have been totally fine. But in a like larger project, you might want to use that client elsewhere in your application. So now we can just import it in here and it's already here. And we could do it in multiple components. So that's kind of the rationale for creating it in a utils file. Although, I personally, if you're creating your own project, I'll maybe start with just keeping it nice and like located in the same file that you're going to use it. But then if you find yourself using it in several other files, then create like a utils file at that point. But now that we have this in place, what we can do here is create our sign up function. So here below our event.prevent default, what we're going to do is call supabase.auth.signup with our email and our password. Now, calling this function is going to return an object. And on that object, it's going to have a data and an error property. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say const data common error. So we're destructuring those two properties from the return value of awaiting Supabase. And we're going to import that from the file we just created, utils, Supabase client, supabase.auth.sign up. You should see this autocomplete here within VS Code. And then we're going to call sign up and we're going to pass in an object in which we're going to set our email piece of state to a email property within this object that we're passing in to supabase.auth.signup. And we can do that with JavaScript shorthand notation just by doing email. So this is setting the email property to our email piece of state. And then let's do the same thing with our password, setting the password property to our password piece of state. And then what we'll do here is I can just do a check and I can say if there is not an error. So if an error doesn't occur, then that means an email was sent to them. So we should set our set is signing up. Set is signing up. We should set that to true if there's not an error. But regardless, let's just console.log our data as well as our error. So we'll console log those out. We could also like throw an error here. That would be perfectly acceptable. We could also put this in the try catch block. That would probably be a decent thing to do as well. But right now, I think that we're fine by just leaving this where it is and just console logging the data as well as the error after we call this sign up function. So with that in place, I believe that we should be able to go back to our application here. And I don't have an account here. So I'm going to click sign up. And then when I click sign up, you can see it switches. Already have an account, then click sign in. But this now switches to sign up here. So I should be able to type in an email and password. And if I didn't mess anything up, we should be able to see the sign up occur. So let me go ahead here and I'm going to do my email and the password, and then I'm going to click sign up. And then what I see below is email send, check your email to confirm sign up. So it looks like we didn't have an error here. Let me see. We didn't have this error. So we set is signing up to true, which means that we're going to show this message right here. So if I go check my email right now, I should see an email to where I can confirm signing up. So I do indeed see confirm your sign up, confirm your mail. So I'm going to click on this here and you can see it redirects me back to my page because we haven't really implemented like taking us to a page of where we've already signed in, but we'll do all of this in a second. Let me now go and see within our Supabase app. I'm going to click on this Authentication tab, and I should see a new user in here with the email that I used, and it looks like everything is confirmed here. So we have successfully signed up with a new user. Now, you did see there that after signing up, they just get redirected back to our sign up page. Probably not the UX we want. So let's go ahead and fix that now. Let's head back to VS Code here, and we're gonna do a couple of things. So first off, we are going to create a new folder within our app that is going to be at Auth. And then we're going to create a folder within Auth saying confirm. And then we're going to create a route.js file within this folder. And then what we're going to do here within this route is effectively after they confirm their sign up here, we need to create a new session. So to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to import, and then this time we're going to do it a little bit more manually. We're going to do create server client and import that from Supabase /SSR. Then we're going to import cookies from next /headers. Then I'm going to import next response from next server. Then we're going to export an async function get that's going to accept a request. And then within here, what we're going to do is we're going to get a token from our URL here. And then within when having that token, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of verify that token, and it's going to effectively start a session here. So I'm going to say const search params is equal to calling new URL and then calling request.url. And then here we're going to say const token hash is equal to search params.get. And then I'm going to do token hash. And then here, we're going to say const type is equal to search params dot get, and it's going to be next. And then from here, it's going to be const cookie store is equal to calling that cookies function from next header. And then here, we're going to create our Supabase server client. So const Supabase is equal to create server client. We're going to call this. We're going to pass in our next public Supabase URL as well as our next public anon key. So let's go ahead and from our Supabase client.js, I'm going to copy these both right here. We're going to pass these in here. But now we want to configure our cookies here. So I'm going to pass in an object as the third argument to this create server client. And then we're going to have cookies. And then this is going to be an object in which we're going to say get, and then there's going to be a name. And then we're going to return our cookie store dot get name. And then we'll use nullish chaining or optional chaining here dot value. So if there is a name, get a value. If not, please don't throw an error. And then we are going to set our name, our value, as well as our options. And then we're going to say cookie store dot get, pass in an object, and it's not dot get, it should be dot set, pass in an object name, value, dot options. So spread our options in to our set function for our cookie store. And this is just going to help us set up this cookie-based session here. And then I'm going to add another one final one, and that's going to be remove. And it's going to have a name and options parameters here. And then we are going to set the cookie store dot set, once again, name, value, and then options. So we're effectively removing the value for this name because we're setting it to this empty string right here. So with this in place here, and I think I may have missed a curly brace here. So I think I need to close this cookie store, and I think I have an extra, I should be all set there. I think I had some messed up curly braces and parentheses, but I should be good to go here. And then below this, I want to say if we have a token hash and we have a type, and what we want to do is we need to say const error, so destructuring error, and that's returned from awaiting Supabase.auth.verify one-time password. And then we're going to pass in the type as well as the token hash. And if we don't have an error, so if not error, then what we can do is just return our next response dot redirect and redirect them to whatever value is on the search params dot next here. But then if that doesn't work for whatever reason, then we'll just kind of return next response dot redirect. And then we'll just go to like, I don't know, we maybe / error. But if we don't create that page by default, Next.js will just show an error page. So we can just do that for now. Now let's go back to Supabase here, and I'm going to go to authentication, and then let's go to email templates. Now, currently, it's going to say follow this link to confirm your user, confirm your mail. But we need to add a few different things to this URL here to make sure that it's redirected to /auth /confirm, which is our route handler here at auth confirm. And then we also need to add a token hash as well as the kind of next location. So what we're going to do is within this ahref here, instead of just confirmation URL, we're going to use this site URL here. So instead of confirmation URL, let's do the site URL. And then we're going to do /auth /confirm, and then question mark token underscore hash. And then that is going to equal, we're going to pass in double curly braces here. It's going to be the dot token hash. So token hash right here, the hash token used in the URL, which is what we need to create our session. And then we have our token hash, and then we need to set and type is equal to, it's going to be email. And then we want to set and next is equal to, well, I think we can just set this to our site URL. So it can just redirect us back to our site URL here. Whoops. And I accidentally opened up a Finder there. But with that, when we click confirm your email, it should try to access our website. So it's just going to be localhost 3000 because that is what we have set. Where are we at here? Right here, our site URL is http:// localhost 3000, which will need to change here once we deploy, which we'll do here towards the end. But what it's going to do, let me go back. And do I need a, so I totally just forgot to save this. So let me redo all that, but you should already have this unless you followed what I did. Then here, let's do this. So I redid everything, and what you need is, so the href should be double curly braces dot site URL. So this is localhost 3000 /auth /confirm. And then we want to add a few search params. So the token hash should be set to this token hash right here. and then the type should be email. And then our next param should be our site URL as well. So localhost 3000, and then click save, and make sure that you are within your confirm sign up here for your email templates. So what it's doing is saying when we click confirm your mail, navigate them to /auth/confirm, which is going to access this route handler right here, in which we're going to create a Supabase server client in which we are going to get the token hash to get our like one-time password to basically sign us up with a new session, and then just redirect us back to our search param of next, which is just localhost 3000. All right, so hopefully that is at least somewhat clear. But, you know, after they sign up and sign in, and they're redirected back to localhost 3000, if they're already signed in, we don't need to show them this page, right? Like, what's the point of showing them a sign-in page if they're already signed in? So what we can do is we can effectively add protected routes to where if the user is signed in, then don't show them our sign-in page. But if they're not signed in, then they should automatically go back to our homepage. They shouldn't really go to any other pages. So what we're going to want to do here is let's create an additional page here. So the way that you create a page in Next.js here is within our app folder, create a new folder, and I'm going to call this photos. And then within the photos folder, I'm going to create a new file and then page.jsx. So since we created a new folder within our app directory and added a page.jsx file within that folder, we have now created a public route here at /photos. And now at this public route, this is basically going to be where the user can upload photos and kind of do their thing with that. So what we want to do here is let's just for now export a default function photos. And where I'm going with this is that we're going to add some middleware here in a second that basically says if a user session is active, redirect them to the photos page because they're already signed in. But if they're not active, then they can't access the photos page. They need to be signed in first. So we're basically making this a protected route. But what this is going to be is we'll have a div here, and this can be a main tag here. And then within this main tag, what we can do is we can do a div and then another div within that div, and we'll do an H1 and we'll just say photos. And then below photos, we'll eventually have a component here that is going to be a photo uploader component. And then we will also eventually have a component here that will be like a photo grid so they can see all their photos. And then we'll have a div down below, and we'll also have a sign out button that we will eventually implement as well. So we'll just do sign out button. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the classes to this page, or the class names to this page, so the user can actually see a decent looking page here. All right. So if you copied and paste that from my GitHub here, just make sure you comment out the photo uploader, the photo grid, as well as the sign out button here. And one other thing that we're going to have on our photos page here is we're actually going to have a nav component, and that is going to be sitting right here. So if you see that in the final project, just make sure you comment out a nav component here as well. I only caught this after I kind of already recorded this portion. So just putting this little edit in here now so you're not getting confused. All right. So if I come back to our project and see how this has a code right now, that's because we signed up. This is basically putting a hash code for us to sign in, but we didn't implement that. So we're not going to worry about that just yet. But I should be able to navigate to /photos. And this takes me to my photos page. But right now, like we only want to be able to access our homepage if we're not signed in, and only our photos page if we are signed in. So we can do that using middleware. All right, so let's come back. And to create middleware, let's head to VS Code here. And within the root of our application, so on the same level as our package.json, our next config, we're going to create a new file, and it's just going to be middleware.js. And within this middleware.js file, this is where we're going to handle our logic for if we have a user, then push them to our photos page. If there's not a user, then push them to our homepage. And we're going to have to create it like a Supabase client to do this so we can access our current user. But just to kind of show you something here. So Supabase has a bunch of different ways, and I didn't mean to hit my volume there, but Supabase has a bunch of different ways to create clients and different things like that. So here within the docs at /guides /auth /server side /creating a client, what you can see is that there's different ways to create this Supabase client, whether you're in a server action, whether you're in a client component. So this was what we did for our utils file. And then within a server component, this is pretty close to what we did, but we were actually in a route handler, which is why we used the cookies. And then we also have the middleware here, which we're lucky for you, we're about to create that. And then, yeah, so you have a bunch of different ways of creating a client, which is why we're not just using that same utils file for all of these clients. They are a little bit different depending whether you're using middleware, route handlers, server actions, so on and so forth. So just wanted to show that to you in case you're wondering why we're like, not just reusing that same utils file over and over again. But now let's go ahead and create this middleware here. So at the top, we're going to import next response from next server. And then we're also going to import create server clients from Supabase SSR. And then we're going to export an async function called middleware that's going to accept a request. And I'll just call it REQ. I'll say const res is equal to next response dot next. So like if we didn't have this middleware in here, this is the response that would be returned. And real quick, middleware is just software that runs in the middle of a certain process. So the process that we have right now is a network request. So we're running this middleware on this request before this request fully completes. So it's just software that runs in the middle of like two other pieces of software, hence middleware. So we have this response here. So if we did nothing, we could just return this response and it would basically be like, we didn't even use middleware. But we actually want to, do some stuff between just returning this response and accepting the response right here. So between these two, what we need to do is create our Supabase client. So const Supabase is equal to create server client, call this function. And then as you might guess, the first two arguments are going to be the same that we use within our app, utils, Supabase client. These two are arguments here. And then we're going to paste those within our create server client function. But then as a third argument, we are going to do a pretty similar thing that we've done before, although it is slightly different, which is why we're not just completely reusing what we've already done before. So passing an object, here's a third argument, and it's going to have a cookies property. And on this cookies property, we're going to have a get, which is going to accept a name. And then we can just return request.cookies.get name $value. So if there is a value, return that. If not, just return undefined. And then as another property, we're going to say set name value options. And then we are going to do request.cookies.set, pass in an object of name, value, options. And then after we call request.cookies.set, we're also going to say const response is equal to next response dot next. But now we want to pass in an object that is going to have the request is going to be headers, and it's going to be request.headers. And then we want to set response.cookies.set, and then we'll do name, value, options. And I know this is a little convoluted, but you're just going to have to bear with me for a sec. And then let's also add a remove function that is going to have a name, options, request.cookies.set, and then it's going to be name, value is set to an empty string, and then spread the options in. And then let me scroll down. And then within under request.cookies.set, we're going to do the same thing that we did earlier, or a very similar thing, in which we're going to basically say const response is equal to next response dot next, call that, pass in an object, and then we're going to set the request, and that's going to set a headers property on that request. That is going to be request dot header. So we're just passing our headers along from our request. And then below this, we're going to set our response dot cookies dot set, pass in an object with a name, value set to an empty string, and options. And that is it. So I know it's a lot, but when creating the Supabase client, we need to kind of manually handle some of these cookies because we're creating this like cookie-based authentication. So we need to just kind of set up some of this stuff manually. All right. And then after we do that, we can then finally say const, and we're going to destructure data from calling supabase.auth.getUser. So we're going to destructure data, but within the data property, there's going to be another object that's going to have a user property. So we're going to do nested destructuring to where within data, we're going to then destructure a user. If this doesn't make sense, check out my video on destructuring JavaScript. But we're going to call await supabase.auth.getUser. And then now that we have the user, we need to add our redirect logic. So we will then say, if we do indeed have a user and the request.next URL.path name is equal to our home route. So if we have a user and they're trying to access our home page, then we just need to return a next response dot redirect. And where do we want to redirect them to? Well, let's do a new URL, all capitals, pass in a string as the first argument, and it's going to be /photos. And as the second argument, it's going to be request.url, which is going to be our base URL. So if they have a user and they try to access our homepage, send them to /photos. However, let's copy this and paste it. If there is not a user and the request.url.pathname does not equal our home route, so if they try to access any other route than our home route, then return redirect, but redirect them back to our home route this time. And then we will return our response if we don't return these two, although we should just return one of those two. But then we need to make sure to run this middleware on export const config. And we're going to set a property called matcher. And then we're going to make sure that this middleware runs when we access our home route, as well as our photos route, but make sure to have the / in there as well. So effectively what we've done here is connected to Supabase, creating this middleware client, which is effectively just me following their docs of how they say to create the middleware client within the Next.js application. And then here we are getting the user from supabase.auth.getUser. If there is a user and they try to access the home route, redirect them to /photos. If there's not a user and they're not accessing the home route, redirect them back to the home route. So they need to then sign in. And then make sure to run this at the home route and /photos. That was a lot. I completely understand. But if I now head back here and let me just like refresh quick, you see that I'm redirected to my photos. And the reason for this is because we must have an active user here because we just signed up here a second ago. So if that is correct, then within this middleware here, I think I should be able to console log this user, and we should be able to see our user within our terminal. So let's come back, let's refresh, and now let me check the terminal and see if I do indeed see this user. And what we see is I console logged a user here, and it has, Ryan at coderyan.io. We have an active session going on. So it has my last sign in and all that stuff. So we do indeed have an active user. So let me delete this. But if I tried to access now / our home route, it should redirect me back to photos because I do indeed have a user. So it does just that. So that is what our middleware is doing here. When I try to access our home route, but I already have a user, it just puts me right back to photos. Now with this in place, you can maybe see what issue, and it's the issue that we can't actually sign out right now. So to fix this, what we need to do is now create a sign out button. So for this, let's go ahead and within our components folder, well, actually, let's go to our photos page. So within photos, let's go to page.jsx, and this is going to be a sign out button. We're going to render it right here. And as you can see, I'm putting it just in the top right of my page. So let's go ahead and within our components folder, let's create a new file and call this sign out button.jsx. And then all we're going to do is export a default function sign out button. And then this is just going to return a form in which the action is going to be, we're going to make a post request to /auth / sign out. And then it's going to be of method is equal to post. And then we are going to render out a button in which the type is going to be equal to submit. So when they click on this button, we're going to make a post request to /auth / sign out. And it's just going to say sign out. And we're also going to add just a little bit of classes to this button as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put a return here and then return here, add these. So they're going to click on this button and it's going to make this post request to /auth / sign out. So as you could guess, we're going to have to implement that, but let's go back to our page.jsx and then let's render out our sign out button here, importing that from /components / sign out button. And then what we need to do now is we need to create a path here to where at auth, we need to do / new folder, sign out. And then we need to create a route.js file within this /auth / sign out. And this is where we're going to handle signing the user out. To do this, we are again going to need to create a server client. And what we're going to do is import a create server client from Supabase SSR. We're going to import cookies here from next / headers. And then we're going to import next response from next / server. And then I am going to now export an async function post that's going to accept a request. And then I'm going to say const cookie store is equal to calling our cookies function like we've done a handful of times now. And now we want to create our server client here. So const Supabase is equal to create server client. The first two arguments are the same as what they've always been. So I'm going to copy these here, come back, paste them. Third argument is going to be similar to where we're going to have cookies, and we're going to set this to get name, and then we're going to return our cookie store dot get name dot value. And I guess we can do this again and add a question mark. And then we need to do comma set, and this is going to be name, value, and options here again. And then we're going to just do cookie store dot set name, value, dot, 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 options to spread the options in as the third argument. And then we're also going to have remove, and it's going to be just name as well as options. And then we need to do our cookie store dot set. And what do we need to set? We need to set our name as well as our value to an empty string, and then spread in our options like usual. So this will create a Supabase client within this API route. And then from here, we need to say const, we're going to say data, but then within the data property, we're going to destructure session is equal to await Supabase dot auth dot get session. And we're going to call that. So we're destructuring the session object from our data object. And then we're going to say if there is indeed a session, then what we want to do is await Supabase dot auth dot sign out. So sign the user out of their current session. And then regardless, we will just return a next response dot redirect, and then we'll redirect them to a new URL, and it will just be back to our home page of our request.url. And I guess we'll also, if a redirect occurs, we will do a redirect status of 302. All right, so when they try to access /auth /sign out and they make a post request, we are effectively going to create a Supabase session or create a Supabase server client, And then once we have that server client, if they have a session, we're going to sign them out and send them back to the home page. And when they click on this sign out button, it should make a post request to auth /sign out. And within my photos page, we render that right here. So if I come back, I do indeed see this sign out button. So if I click on it, I should see I'm navigated back to my localhost 3000. And now if I try to access photos once I'm here, you see I can't access photos here because I don't have an active session anymore. But now if I relog in with Ryan at coderyan.io, and if I remember my password here, I should see sign in. I just clicked sign in, nothing happened, but I think that that actually makes a lot of sense because I don't believe we actually ever implemented signing in to our page here. So let's go back to Auth form. And yeah, so we're actually not even handling signing in. So let's go ahead and do that. So within handle login, we need to set is signing in here right at the top to true. And then once we do that, we can then say const data, comma, error is equal to await Supabase.auth.sign in with password. Call that function, pass in an object to where we set our email to our email and our password to our password. And then regardless of what happens here, I want to let's just console log our error in our data if anything occurs. But I'll say if there's not an error, then what do we want to do? Well, if we sign them in, we want to navigate them to the photos page. So to do that, we can say const router is equal to use router, importing that from not next router, next navigation is what it needs to be. So if there's not an error, then we can just say router dot push, and then we will push them to / photos. But if there is an error, well, actually, yeah, I guess else, then we just need to set is signing in to false, and then we can check our console.error if there is an error. So I think that's all I need to do here. I'm going to come back. I'm going to just refresh this for good measure. Do Ryan at coderyan.io, type in my password, click signing in, and we do indeed get an error, which is never fun. So let's go ahead. Router.push is not a function. So let's come back. Router.push photos const router is equal to use router, which I did not actually call this function. So let's come back. And when you see I come back, I am signed in because it signed in successfully. My error was just when I called the router.push. So now let's sign out. And I should be able to now do Ryan at coderyan.io, type in my password, click signing in, navigate to photos. I refresh. We're all good. I try to go back to my homepage. It doesn't work because I'm already logged in. But now let's click sign out, and let's sign up with a new email. So let's do another one. Of course, I use a different password for everything. I'm going to click sign up, check your email, and then I see this confirm your sign up. I'm going to click on it. And then you see I get an error. Because at localhost auth / confirm / token hash, we have something wrong here. So let's go check this auth.confirm route handler here. So let's go ahead and console.log this error here. And, sorry about this, but errors definitely occur in development. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to refresh this URL here. And then let's check within our terminal here and see if we have any issues. So I have error, auth API error, invalid email, verification type. So where's our type? Our type, and yeah, can you guys see what I did wrong here? So I set my type to be search params.get next, which of course is definitely not what we want to do here. We actually want to do the type should be search params.get type, and next to be search params.get next. So let's change this to next, and let's option shift down arrow, and I'll say const type, and then this should say type right here. So I think that's now correct. Let's come back and let me refresh this again. And as you can see, it does look like we're now signed up as well as signed in. So let's check Supabase here. Let's go back to our Authentication tab, which is right here. And I now have my 2 users here. Okay, so just a little bit of an error there, but we worked through it. So let's come back. I should be able to sign out. I should be able to sign in with my new user, type in my password, and click signing in, and sign out. So we've successfully implemented protected routes, signing in and signing up with email and password here. So now that this is all in place, we can actually, within our photos page, now implement uploading photos and storing those in storage and kind of getting all that started. So we've learned a bunch so far, but let's move on to those other features. So what I want to go ahead and implement now is uploading an image once we're signed in here. So let me re-sign in here, assuming everything still works, in which what I want to show is an upload button right here in which they can click it, and then that will access their file system, and they'll be able to select a image that they can upload. And then we're going to upload that to, within Supabase here, the storage bucket that we want them to. So let's head over here to Supabase and let's click on storage. So what we need to do here is effectively just kind of what it says here. Create buckets to store and serve any type of digital content. So we want to create a photos bucket that allows a user to upload photos to that bucket. And we also want them to be able to delete photos as well as, of course, see the photos that are in their bucket. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and at the top left here, click new bucket. So I'm going to do that. And we're going to call this photos. And it is not going to be a public bucket, which is also going to mean that we're going to have to add some different policies to this, but we'll make this a private bucket just because if someone's, uploading personal photos, I think it makes sense to make those private. Now, we probably could add features to make photos public if the user wants to get a public URL to those photos to share with someone. But right now we're just going to make them private. So let's go ahead and create this bucket. Now, since this bucket is now created, we now want to create a folder. So I'm going to create a folder here, and this folder is going to be user_uploads. And then now that we have a photos bucket with a user uploads folder, effectively a user is going to upload their photos within this user uploads folder within a folder that matches their user ID. But to allow them to do this, we also need to add policies here. So currently the buckets are private. So we need to allow policies saying okay, an authenticated user can add photos to this bucket, or an authenticated user cannot add photos, stuff like that. So let's go over here, and on the right, let's select create new policy. Actually, it just says new policy. Click on this. And what we're going to do is for full customization, we're going to create a policy from scratch. And let's go ahead and first create the select policy. So I'm going to name this up at the top here. I'm going to just say allow user select. And then for the allowed operation here, we're going to click select. So this is going to allow them to retrieve the photos that they've uploaded. And then for the target roles, we're going to make this an authenticated user here. So they need to be an authenticated user. And then for the policy definition, what we basically want to do here is we have to provide a SQL conditional expression that returns a Boolean. So what we're going to have to do is effectively say that an authenticated user can upload into the photos bucket here within the user uploads folder. So I have already created this policy ahead of time. I'm not like a SQL master. I'm genuinely more of a front end guy. So I have written this out ahead of time. So what this is going to look like is this right here. We're going to make sure the bucket ID is equal to photos, and we're going to make sure the auth.uid is not null, so it is an authenticated user, and we're going to make sure that they're uploading into the user, or they're selecting from the user uploads folder, and that's essentially it. So we're returning a Boolean here, making sure that an authenticated user is selecting from the user uploads folder, and it's within a folder that matches their auth.uid. So then I'm going to click review, and we are going to save policy. And you should see successfully saved policy. So now that we have this in place, we're going to add an additional policy for inserting. So I'm going to click edit, and then instead of allow, oh wait, I didn't want to do that. I want to go new policy here, and for full customization, and this one should be allow user upload, and it should be insert, and it should be authenticated. And then I've also written out this SQL expression ahead of time. You can, of course, pause the video right here to make sure that yours matches exactly what I have here. But this is basically the same thing that we put last time. So effectively the same exact expression here. So we're making sure that it's within the photos, user uploads folders, and that their auth UID matches up correctly. So then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to review, save the policy, and then we just have one more policy to go here, and that is going to be deleting. So we're going to go new policy, full customization. I'm going to name this allow user delete. I'm going to select delete. And then I also have the policy created here, and I'm going to paste it in here. And as you can see, it's very, very similar as well. All right, so feel free to screenshot this and paste it in here, and make sure that you also select authenticated here. All right, so I'll leave this up for just a couple more seconds here. But if you want to pause right now so you can copy this policy definition, it's basically just saying that we want to allow an authenticated user to delete their photos in their bucket. So then I'm going to click Save Policy. And now we should theoretically have all of our policies in place, and we have our photos bucket. So what we can do now is we can start creating the UI to actually allow the user to upload a photo here. Let's head back to VS Code. And what we're going to do is I'm going to just close all these files at the top just because I have a lot open right now. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a new component. And this component, let me just close all these out. This component is just going to be photo uploader.jsx. So photo uploader.jsx. And for this component, what we're basically going to allow the user to do is access the file system and then upload those photos to their bucket within our photos bucket. So we're going to make this a client component because the user is going to click on this upload photo button, and then we are going to use client-side JavaScript to access the event.target.files and handle all that stuff. So I'm going to use client at the top. I'm going to do function photo uploader. And then what we're going to do now is let's just structure out the HTML here first, and then we'll fill in the functionality here later. So let's just return. And then what we're going to return is we're going to return a label. And the HTML4 is just going to be photo -upload. And then I'm going to add some styles to this label as well. So let me move this to a new line, and I'm going to copy and paste the styles that I've already created for this. So you can see these here, and you can of course copy this and paste these into this label from my finished project linked in the description below. But what we're going to do here within this label is we're going to have some text in which we're basically just going to say upload photo. Now, if they're uploading a photo, I want to show some indication of that. So we're going to have some state that is uploading state. And if they are in uploading state, then we want this text to say uploading. Else, say upload photo. So we're going to say uploading ? Then just say uploading. Else, we're going to say upload photo. And then we'll create this state up here. So I'm going to say const uploading, set uploading is equal to use state. And then we'll initialize this as false. And I'm not sure why it imported use state like it did here. But let me go ahead and just import use state from React. And then below this text here, this is where we want to actually put our input. So we're going to do an input And then the type of our input is actually going to be file, because we're going to allow them to upload files, and this is going to give access to a file system. The ID here is going to be photo-upload, and let me put these params on a new line here. So we have the type of file, the ID is photo uploaded, and then we're going to do on change. Well, this is where we're going to want to handle a file upload. So I'm going to say handle file upload, and we'll create this handle file upload function here in a second. And then we want to disable this input if they're uploading. So set disabled to uploading. So while they're uploading a photo, we don't want them to be able to upload an additional photo or try to. So while they're uploading, just set this to disabled. And then we're also going to set a class name to hidden here. With that, now we need to implement just the handle file upload function. So this is going to be basically the meat of this function. And let's actually export default function photo uploader. So now we need to create an async function handle file upload, and it's going to accept an event. And that event is going to be when the user clicks on this input to handle a file upload. So what we're going to do here is this time around, let's actually put this in a try catch block, follow some best practices here. So let's try, in which at the start of this, we're going to set uploading to be true. And then we need to access the file from this user upload. So the file, const file, is going to be accessed on the event.target.files, and it is going to be at the 0th index. So that is going to be the file that the user is trying to upload. But we also need to get the file extension. So const file extension is going to equal our file dot name dot split, and it needs to be split on a period. And then we're going to call dot pop. So that is going to give us the file extension. And of course, you could do this all manually as well. That's how I figured this out. I first console.logged, okay, what does the file look like? And then I was like, all right, well, how can I get the file extension from the file name? Well, I figured out that it's file.name.split.pop, and so on and so forth. But now that we have the file as well as the file extension, then we can create a file name. And this file name is what we're going to upload to our database here. So let's create a file name, and let's say const file name is equal to backticks. So I'm using a JavaScript template string here, and I'm going to do $ curly brace, and we're just going to prepend this with some random number. So to do this, I'm going to just use math.random. You could also do like some other random generator, but I didn't want to make us like download any external packages or anything like that. So I'm going to do math.random dot, and then we'll add the file extension right here. So file extension. So we're creating a file name using just a random string, and then we're adding the file extension for the user. And then once we have this in place, now we can access the user from our Supabase client. So what we can do is say const data : user. So we're destructuring data, and then we're destructuring the user on the data property is equal to, and then we're going to do await Supabase. We're going to import Supabase from our utils / Supabase client, await Supabase dot auth dot get user. So we're going to get our current active user, but let's just do a check here. If not user, then we're going to throw an error. So throw new error and just say user not authenticated for photo upload. But now if we do have a user, then what we want to do is we want to upload this to our Supabase storage. And to do this upload, what we need to do is pass in a file path as well as the file that we want to upload. So we're going to say const file path is equal to backticks. Well, we're going to assume that we're using our photos bucket. So within our photos bucket, what do we want the file path to look like? Well, we want it to look like user underscore uploads / and then we are going to have a user ID folder within user upload. So user.id. So our current authenticated user here, we're using their ID to create a folder within our user uploads folder within our photos bucket. And then / we are going to, / after the curly brace, / this is where we are going to use our file name. So $ curly brace file name. So effectively, we're getting our currently authenticated user, and then the file path that we're going to upload is at user uploads / the user's ID / and then the file name that they're trying to upload here. And then once we have that, we can say const, and then I'm going to get an error potentially here is equal to await Supabase dot storage. So access the storage module dot from, and then we're in access our photos bucket here within our storage. And then we're going to call, and I'm going to move this to another line. I'm going to say dot upload. And then we're going to upload. We need to pass in 2 arguments, our file path, as well as our file. So we are telling Supabase that within this file path of our storage bucket, we want to upload this file, or the file that the user is trying to upload. And then what we want to do is I will say, if there is an error, then we're just going to throw this error. But if that is not true, then we should now have our photo uploaded within our storage bucket. Now, once we upload that photo, we are probably going to have to do some stuff here like revalidate our cache so we see the updated page. But let me just do like a to-do and just say update UI with new photo. We're going to have to do a little bit more here, but we'll wait on that for a second. And then let me just catch an error here. And if there is an error, we'll just console.error this error. And then finally, if once this process completes, we will set uploading to be false. So with this, we should now have a component in which a user can click a upload photo button, and then that will open up their file system, and we will access the file they're trying to upload, and then we will attempt to upload that to our photos storage bucket, and that should all work out correctly if I didn't do anything incorrectly here. So now let's render this within our photos page. So let's go to photos here. Let's go to the page.jsx. And right here is where we want to render our photo uploader. So you can now see it on our page. So let's come back here, and we do see this upload photos button. So what I want to do now is let's test this out. So I'm going to click, and you can see it opens this dialog here, and it opened a folder for me called project photos because I created this photo ahead of time. So let's choose I've got some just photos of like some watches that I like, as well as like dogs and a hiking trip. So I'm going to upload this photo right here, and I'm going to click open, and it says uploading. and then it no longer says uploading. So either an error occurred or it successfully uploaded the photo. So let me go ahead and check this file. I'm going to click reload here. I'm going to click user uploads. And then I see a folder within user uploads of some user ID. And then within this, I see a photo here. And it is indeed this photo of me and my dog. Let me zoom in on this. Aw, nice photo of me and my dog. We did a hike up here in Colorado. So that was a good day. Shout out to my girlfriend for taking this photo for me. So moving back here, what you can see is that within our photos bucket, we have uploaded a photo to a user uploads folder within a folder for my user's ID. And then we have our photo right here. So we have our math.random file name here, and then just .png. The file extension was PNG. So it looks like within our photo uploader, we have successfully uploaded this photo to our bucket here, which is pretty dang cool to see. So now that we have this in place, we need to now create within our photos page, we want to create our photos grid, because we now want to be able to access or to be able to see the photo that we just uploaded, because, this is great at all. We've added it to our storage bucket, but we don't want the user to have to come to Supabase and look at the photo here. We want them to see it in a nice little photo grid right down here. So let's go ahead and head back to VS Code here. And what we now want to do is we want to create our photo grid component. And there's going to be a decent amount going on with this component here, but it's not too terribly complex. So what we're going to do here is let's go to components, and then I'm going to create a new file and call this photo grid.jsx. I believe this is going to be able to be just a server component here. So let's go ahead and I'm going to do export default async function photo grid. And we are eventually going to update this component to accept a prop to tell whether this is within because we're also going to have our normal photo upload page, which is going to be all of our uploads. But then we are also going to implement a favoriting feature. So eventually we'll have a prop here that says favorites, but right now it's just going to be photo grid. And then within this, we're going to first get our user. But to get our user, since this is a server component, we actually want to create a new client for our server components. So we're actually going to go to our utils folder again, but instead of Supabase client, we're going to name this Supabase server client. And I spelled client wrong, client.js. And this is where we're going to create a server client here. So we need to import, and this is going to be create server client instead of create browser client. And then we're going to import cookies from next header. And then what we're going to do is say function create Supabase. And then we're going to say const cookie store is equal to calling our cookies function. And then we are going to return our create server client, in which the first two arguments are going to be the first two arguments as always. So I'm going to just copy these here, paste these in, and then we are going to pass in an object as a third argument, and this is going to be cookies, but don't worry, it's not going to be everything. It's just going to be get, and then it's going to be accept the name, and then it's just going to return our cookie store dot get name dot value. And then all we're going to do here is export const Supabase server is equal to create Supabase. And we're going to call this function and export our Supabase server. So this just comes from their docs for creating a Supabase server. So now back within our photo grid, what we can do is we can say const data user, so destructuring the user property from our data property is equal to await Supabase server imported from utils / Supabase server client, what we just did. And then I'm going to do .auth.get user and then call that function. And then once we have that user, we're going to want to get all of the photos from that user's bucket. So we're going to say const photos is equal to, and we're going to create a function. We're going to do await and then fetch user photos and then pass in our user. So now let's go ahead and create this fetch user photos just in this component here. So I'm going to say async function fetch user photos, and it's going to accept a user. And what we'll do here is say at the top, I'll say if not user, we'll just do an early return here. But if we do have a user, we'll say const folder path. Well, what's the folder path going to be here within our bucket? It's going to be user underscore uploads / curly brace. So make sure this is within backticks. You're doing a JavaScript template literal, and then user.id. Because when we create and end with a backslash as well, because when we create a new folder or new photo, we're uploading those folders within photos / user upload / whatever the user's ID is / then it's going to be that folder name. And then I can say const data error is equal to await, and then we're going to use the Supabase server that we already imported .storage. And then what we're going to do is say from access our photos bucket. And then we're going to list. And what we're going to list are going to be all of our files basically from our folder path. So this is going to return all of our files within user uploads and whatever that user ID is. And then I can just say if there is an error, let's just console.error fetching photos. And I guess we can also console log the error as well here, and then we'll just return. But if there's not an error, then we will return our data. By this line of code, we should have all of our photos, but that's not quite going to be enough. Once we have our photos, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get our photo URLs. So I'm going to say const photo objects is equal to await get photo URLs. And then we're going to pass in photos as well as our user. And then I'm going to create a function here that is going to be an async function called get photo URLs. And it's going to accept photos as well as a user. And then what we're going to do here is effectively generate a new URL for every single photo path. And this is going to allow us to generate an image for this. Now, since this is going to be a private photos, we have to actually create a signed URL. But let's just show you this here. So I'm going to return promise.all, and then we're going to do photos.map. And then we're going to pass in an async function here that's going to accept a photo because we're mapping over it. And then what we're going to do within here is say const data, comma, air is equal to await. And then we're going to access our Supabase server dot storage. And then I'll move this to a new line and I'll say dot from photos. And then what we're going to have to do now is do dot create signed URL. So we need to create a signed URL that is effectively going to make a public signed URL for this photo. It's going to be a user uploads / curly brace user ID / curly brace. And every photo is going to have a photo dot name, which is basically going to be the photo file path. And then we also need to pass in how long we want this to last for. So I'm going to do 60 times 60. So which is going to be effectively be 60 minutes. So we're creating a valid public URL here that is going to last 60 minutes in which we can actually display the photos based on this signed URL. And then we can say if there's an error, and we can console.error and say error generating signed URL. And then we can also log the photo, and then I can just do a return null here. And if that is not true, I don't want to return a URL, which is going to be the data.signed URL, and then a photo name, which is just going to be photo.name. So this should give us our photo URLs here. And then once we have our photo URLs, we can basically map over those photo URLs and display those within a Next.js image. Now, eventually we're going to add more logic here to implement our favorite photos. But right now, we can actually just map over our photo objects and display the photo URL because they're going to have this URL property. So what we can do here is we can return, and then this is just going to be a div, and I'm going to add Flexbox to this div using Tailwind CSS. So you can, of course, copy this if you would like. But I'm going to do flex wrap, justify center, and put a little bit of a gap there. And then we're going to map over our photo objects dot map, accept a photo for each one. And then we are going to return. And then what we're going to return is going to be a photo component here. So we're going to create another component, but it's going to be a photo component. And then we're going to pass some props to this photo component. So one prop is going to be, of course, the key, which is just going to be our photo.name. So our photo is going to have actually it's going to be photo name. So it's going to have a photo name as well as a URL. And then the src is going to be a photo.url. The alt is going to be backticks photo, and then I'll do $curly brace photo name. And then let me scroll down a little bit. We're going to make these all the same width and height. So I'm going to just set it to 200 width. And then a height is also going to be 200. We're kind of using magic constants here, but this is the only place we're going to use this. So I think it's fine for now. And then we're going to use photo name. It's going to be photo name. And then we're eventually going to pass in whether it is a favorited photo or not, but we'll wait on that until we implement favoriting photos. So now we need to create a photo component here. So I'm going to do new file, and then I'm going to do photo.jsx. And within this photo, we're actually going to give the ability for a user to click on a photo and then pop up a photo modal. So they're going to click on a photo and like see an enlarged modal of that photo. So what we're going to do here is we'll make this a client component, and then I'm going to go ahead and say function, or let's actually just export default function photo, in which for its props, it's going to accept an src, an alt, a width, a height, a photo name, and eventually it's going to accept an is favorited, but I'm going to just set that to false as a default right now, and we're not going to worry about that just yet. But what we're going to do here is for this photo, like I said, we are going to want to return a modal, but let's not add the modal logic just yet. Let's just go ahead and return. And what we're going to return is a div, and we'll add some styles here in just a second. But one style that is going to be important to add is going to be style is equal to width, comma, height. So we're going to make sure this photo matches the width and height that we described as a prop. But then we are eventually going to add to this photo a way for them to favorite and delete the photo. So eventually we're going to have like a form right here that's going to allow them to use a server action to delete the photo. And then we're also going to have a form that uses server action to allow them to add a photo to favorites. But we're going to implement those a little bit later on. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to implement an image, and we're going to import that from next image. And we're going to set an src is equal to the src, alt is equal to the alt, layout is going to equal to fill, and then we're going to pass a style prop in which we're going to do object fit, and that is going to be cover. And then we're going to do object position, and that is going to be center. And then we are going to close this out here. Now, eventually we will add a modal here, and we will delete the photo as well as add the photo from favorites, and we will use the photo name to do that. But right now we're just going to leave these unused right here. And then I do want to add some classes to this outer div. So I'm going to go ahead and paste those in right here. You can go ahead and look at my project within my photo component and copy and paste this class name here for this outer div. Just know that you're going to see some other stuff like, a couple of forms in here, as well as some modal logic. But right now, we actually don't need to do that. So I have this in place now. We did the logic to get our photos from our database. Let's make sure to import our photo from ./photo. And let me indent these so it's a little bit more clear. But now what we should maybe see, so I'm not seeing anything right now when I refresh my page, which I think we should have if I did everything right. Did we render our photo grid here? We did not. So let's actually go ahead. And do I pass any props to photo grid? We do not. So let's go ahead and render the photo grid here. So let's do photo grid imported from components /photo grid. And now let's come back and I refresh and I still don't see anything. So not the best side in the world. So let's go ahead and see. I don't have any errors thrown, which is good. Maybe I can, what happens if I just console log photo objects here, and then I refresh my page. I see my photo objects is empty, which makes me feel like I might have put a typo in here somewhere. User uploads, user ID, photo name. Let's go ahead and also console log my photos here. So you guys are getting real world debugging here. So photos is also an empty object. That's not good. Let's go ahead and check this fetch user photos function. So it should be was it user upload or was it user uploads? Plural. It was indeed plural. So that's going to be an issue. So let me switch that to user uploads. And then if I come back and I refresh, I get an invalid SRC prop, which, is not great, but it's more than what we had before. So let me go ahead and check. So our URL, it looks good here. This looks like a correct URL. The photo name also looks correct. So our photo objects, I think looks pretty good. So let me go ahead and I'm going to delete this console.log. And my SRC prop is my photo URL. So let's go into our photo component and let me go ahead and console.log the SRC here. And this is, whoops, I don't know what happened there. I know what's going on here. So it actually is not anything to do with this here. So we can delete this. And this also looks good. So what we need to do is in Next.js, if you're accessing external files or file images, we actually need to configure that within our Next.js config. So we're going to open our next.config.js. And then for this, we're going to add an images property. And then we need to add remote patterns. And then this is going to be an array in which we're going to pass in an object in which the protocol, this is going to be a string that is HTTPS. And then the host name, well, this is going to be something prefixed with like supabase.co. So it's going to be this right here as the host name. So copy this, if assuming you're seeing the same exact error, copy that host name and then paste it within there. And then I think this might fix the issue. Let me do a refresh on this page. And we do indeed see my photo here of me and my dog, which matches up with this photo here within Supabase. So, hey, we've successfully added the ability to upload a photo. Now, let's go ahead and try to upload another photo. And I think we're going to see an issue that I alluded to a little bit earlier in how it doesn't like refresh my page. And eventually we want to be able to like click on this photo and see like a full size photo showing a modal. But let's first check out this. So let's upload another photo and I'll use an image from a hike I did up in Aspen, Colorado. So we uploaded it. We don't see it on the page here, but let's see if it's in Supabase. So let me reload. And I do see it in Supabase. But you can see I don't see it here. Now, why is this? This is because it's not like revalidating and refreshing my page. It's just a static page here. So we've uploaded it, but we didn't revalidate the cache. So let's go to our photo uploader component. And yeah, we need to update UI with new photo. So the way that we're going to do this is, let's go ahead and say const router is equal to use router and call this function. And then here we can call, if this is successful, router.refresh. And let me make sure, not from next router, it should be from next navigation. And then it should be router.refresh. So we see I've added this photo now, but let's see if it works. So I'm going to do upload photo. Let's upload this photo, uploading. And then that was some weird behavior. We actually don't see the photo, but now if I refresh my page, let's do a hard refresh. I now see my two photos. So what just happened there is we called router.refresh and it refreshed my page, but we didn't revalidate our cache. So we just returned our first photo because we just returned whatever was in our cache. So before we call router.refresh, we actually need to revalidate our Next.js cache. So there's probably a few ways we do this. I'm going to show you one strategy just kind of for the sake of showing you what I thought was an interesting way to solve this issue. So what we're going to do is create an API endpoint that just refreshes our cache. So before calling router.refresh, we are going to await, caps lock is on. We're going to await, and this is going to be fetch, and then it's going to be a string relative path /API /revalidate. And then as a second argument to fetch, we're going to say the method is going to be equal to post. The headers property is going to be set to content hyphen type is going to be application /JSON. And then the body is going to be body. And then what we're going to do is basically say JSON.stringify, because we're making a request here. And we want to add a path. And the path that we want to revalidate is going to be /photos. So within our revalidate API endpoint, we're just going to revalidate whatever path is sent as this post request. So we could technically use this endpoint to revalidate any path within our application if we make this fetch request to it. So let's go ahead and create with an app. Let's create API, a folder API, and then let's create another folder called revalidate. And then within revalidate, we need to create a route.js file. So when a user makes a post request to /API /revalidate, we will handle that within this API or this route.js file. So to do this, what we are going to have to do is we're going to have to create another Supabase client, and then we're going to have to trigger this path revalidation. So this is going to be a little bit here. It's nothing crazy, just about 50 lines of code. So we're going to export an async function, and then this is going to match whatever request that we want to handle. In our case, we want to handle a post request here. So export async function post. We're going to call this function, and we're going to accept a request. And then within this post, we're going to try, and then we're going to say const body is equal to await request.json. So we are going to basically parse this request here. We're going to say the const path is equal to body.path. So this matches the body.path here of our request. So body path, it should be /photos in this instance. And we'll say const cookie store is equal to calling the cookies function, importing that from next headers, and make sure we call that. And then this is where we again want to create our Supabase client. So const Supabase is equal to create server client. And then in the docs here, it's just going to be creating the Supabase client for an API endpoint, which is just slightly different than what we've done before. But I'm going to go ahead and let's go to Supabase client in our utils, copy this right here again, head back to our route here, paste those in here. And then as a third argument to this function, we are going to pass an object that has a cookies property. And then we are going to set up a get name that is going to return our cookie store.get name $value. And then below this, we're going to do comma set name, comma value, comma options. And then it's going to be our cookie store.set. And then we're going to pass in our name, our value, and spread in our options. And then under set, we're going to do the remove that just accepts name as well as an options. And then we're going to do our cookie store dot set. And then we're going to set the name and the value to an empty string to basically remove it. And then pass in our options here. So then once we have this, we can say const data :user is equal to await supabase.auth.get user. So similar to what we've done before. And then once we have this user, let's first check if not user, and we just want to return a new response here, JSON.stringify, and we'll set the message is going to be unauthorized, and then let's also pass in an object here that has a status of 401, and then we'll set the headers, and this is going to be content hyphen type is equal to application JSON. We should now at this point assume we have a user, and this is where we want to now trigger revalidation. So we say if there is a path, then we're going to call revalidate path. We're going to import that from next/cache. So import revalidate path from next/cache, and we're going to call revalidate path and pass in the path. And if that is successful, we're going to return a new response. So I'm going to take this code, paste it here, return a new response. But this message is now going to say, let's just do backticks, revalidated, and then I'll do $curly brace path. So we're basically saying we revalidated the path successfully, and then I'll just return maybe like a 200 status code, and then the content type is still going to be application JSON. But if there isn't a path, else, let's go ahead and copy this again, paste it. We're going to return a new response saying no path. And then status, let's just do, like a 400. I think that's like a bad request. And then content type is application JSON. And I think that's all we have to do here. So what we're doing, I know that was a lot, but basically within our photo uploader, if we successfully upload the photo, we need to revalidate our cache. So we're going to make a post request to API revalidate with our /photos path, because this is the page we want to revalidate. And then once we upload a photo, we're going to handle that. And then once we make this request, we're going to handle that here, in which we're going to get the path. We're going to create our Supabase client. And then if there is a path, we're going to revalidate that path using the revalidate path from next cache, and then return a successful response. Else, if there's not a user or if there's not a path, we're going to, return some errors. And it looks like I have a little error here, which it says catch or finally expected. So what I forgot to do is below this, we need to still catch an error, and then we will console.error this error, and then we will return, and then I will copy this and delete that, return a new response in which we will say the message is, we'll just say error revalidating path status, and then this is actually going to be an error. Let's do a 500, and then content type application JSON. So that should indeed be what we need. So let's go ahead and come back here to this page. I'm going to do a hard refresh just to make sure everything looks good. But let's now upload another photo here. And I think all I have left is watches. So let's go ahead and do this one. Uploading. And then we now see the photo immediately shows here because we revalidated our path and then refreshed our page. So we could indeed see this updated page with our photo. So we have now successfully been able to upload as well as retrieve photos from our Supabase bucket here. But now what we want to do is implement showing a modal here. We also want to be able to delete photos, and we also want to be able to favorite photos and then, go to a /photos page to see those photos. So we've made a lot of progress here, but let's now move on to implementing those features. So let's head back to VS Code here. And what I want to implement now is the modal component. So let's go ahead and back to our photo. We're going to want to implement the modal within this photo here. So what we're going to do is let's create a new component here. And this is going to be called photo modal.jsx. And we'll do JSX. And this is going to be a client component. And then we are going to export a default function called photo modal. And we are going to pass a couple props here. We're going to pass an src, an alt, as well as an on close function. And then we'll just say, if there's no src passed, we will return null. And then for a modal here, a lot of this is going to be done with just styles. So we'll have an outer div and then an inner div here. And then right here, we'll have a button in which I'll have the on click. And this will be on close. It'll call our close modal function. And then this will just say close. And then below this button, we will have an additional div. And this div will wrap around a Next.js image. And I need to do image like so and import that from next image. And then this image will have an src set to our src. Alt is going to be set to alt. And then we'll set it to layout is going to be set to fill. And then we will also do object fit set to contain. And then we will also add a couple styles here in a second. So really, this is just the HTML here. But now I'm going to copy and paste the class names, the Tailwind CSS class names from my kind of finished project. So you can do this as well. Or, you could ask ChatGPT, hey, make this a photo modal. And I'm sure it could add some classes as well. But here are the classes that I've already created. And let me line this up. So we just added a class name here to our image, class name to the wrapper div, to the buttons, to this other wrapper div, and of course the kind of container div. So this should really set up what we need for a photo modal. And then back within the photo component, we now need to render out this modal. So to do this, we are going to have a piece of state here saying const show modal, comma set show modal is equal to use state, importing that from React, and we'll initialize it to false. And then we'll make a function here that is just function toggle modal. And all it's going to be is set show modal, not show modal. So if show modal is true, then it's going to set show modal to false. If show modal is false, it's going to set it to true. This is our toggle modal function. And then below here, let's actually render out a React fragment. And then we will place this div within this React fragment here. And let me see if I can get this to look a little less gross. I'll indent this here. And then below here, we will just add some state. We'll open up curly braces to enter JavaScript land. And I'll say show modal, ampersand, render a photo modal component that we just made. And then now all we need to do is set the src to the src of our photo component. And then we set our alt to be alt that we already have. And then the on close is going to equal toggle modal. And then we will close this component here. So if show modal is true, then we are going to render this photo modal. Now, we also need a way to kind of handle showing this modal. So what we need to do is when they click on this image here, we want to then call set, or let's pass in an inline function, and we will set show modal to be true. If I go back to our application here and I click on a photo, you see it does indeed show the modal. And just based on how my like screen share is set up, it looks like it's maybe cutting off the bottom of this, but like I still see, like in my actual web page, I still see it. So like if I show you this, you should see it pretty much centered in the page. I'm just showing you this so I can see you can see the URL of this. But then if I click close, it closes it. And then we pop up this nice little full screen images of this modal here. So pretty cool. I think that this is like a pretty standard feature that we would need to have in this application so they could actually click and see the photos here. So with that in place, now we can start implementing, I think, deleting a photo. So let's go ahead and do that now. So let's head back, and within our photo page here, let's go ahead and add the ability to delete a photo. So the way that we're going to do this is we're actually going to create a server action that is going to delete a photo. So what I want to do is we're going to add within this kind of container here, we're going to add a form in which the action is eventually going to be calling delete photo. And that's going to be a server action that we will indeed add. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and move this to another line. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a class name to this photo or to this form here that you can also copy and paste from my GitHub. And then we're going to have an input, and let me move this over here, but it's going to be a hidden input. And this is basically just going to be used so we have access to our photo name when we go and delete a photo. So it's going to be a hidden input that is going to have a name, and that is just going to be photo path. And then the value is going to be our SRC. And excuse me, we're not using the photo name yet for this. To delete a photo, we're going to use the SRC, but to add or remove a photo from favorites, that is where we are going to use the photo name. But for here, we're just going to use the SRC to delete a photo. And then we're going to have a button in which it is going to be of type submit. And then we are also going to add a class name here to this button as well. So let me move this on separate lines so it's a little easier to see. So you can copy and paste that class name as well. I am using an icon here from Material UI. So that's also going to require us to install a couple of packages here. So what we're going to want to do, and as I open my terminal here, I actually see I accidentally used in our photo modal, I accidentally used this legacy prop here. So let me come back. It should actually be a style that has this set. So let me swap object fit contain out for style, cover object position center. And I believe that should remove those errors. So let me refresh and let me check the console again. And it looks like I'm still getting as a legacy prop layout. So I don't think I'm supposed to use layout fill here. Let me just remove that. And let me also remove it here. And then I also want to add, I think it's changed to fill as true. So that should be used in replacement of what we had previously. So I don't think I had it here, right? And then I think we also need to add a width, and let's just do like maybe 500, and a height is equal to 500. And let's see how this ends up looking. Okay. And I ran into just some image component things to where I was getting some errors in the console, but I think I got this worked out. So what I needed to do is within our photo component here, what we needed to do is set a width and height here. And then also I set a style of object fit cover, object position center. So within your photo component, make sure that you also have your image looking like this with the correct props here. And then within photo modal, we should have src, alt, but then it should be fill equals true. And then style, object fit cover, object position center. So if I open my terminal here, everything looks good, but let me hit some return statements. Let me refresh this page. We still see all of my photos. I see no errors. Let me open up this photo here. We see the enlarged Rolex. We see me and my dog. And then if I come back, we don't see any errors. So kind of got that sorted out. Sorry about that. I think I used a legacy prop there, which gave me errors and then made me switch my props around a little bit. So just make sure your photo modal image matches this, and then your photo image matches this. And then I think we should be kind of good to go here. So, and yeah, within your photo grid, yeah, you can just make sure you're passing the same props because that's just using our photo component. But now that I have all of that sorted out, I think what I was about to do is install some packages. So what I was saying is within this delete button, what we were going to do is we were going to actually render out a icon from Material UI. So to do this, let's open a new terminal by hitting that plus icon. I'm going to npm install, and what we need to install is @MUI. So @MUI, and then it's going to be /icons-material. So I'm going to install that package, but then that icons package relies on two other packages. So I also need to npm install, and it's going to be @emotion/react. And then if I'm going to hit clear, but if I hit up arrow twice, it brings me to my command that I just ran here 2 times ago. But now instead of @emotion_react, we want to do @emotion_styled, and then install that as well. So then after installing those, we should be able to go back to our component here. And what we should do is right here within our button element, let's go ahead and render out a delete, and we're going to import that from material icons. So I imported delete from MUI icons material. So now if we check this out, we now see a trash can icon on this page. And the reason it's a little bit over to the left here is because we're going to add a heart icon to this next, which is going to allow us to effectively favorite a photo. So now to actually delete a photo, we need to go ahead and we need to implement this server action for deleting a photo. So we need to create a delete photo server action. So within my app directory, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this actions. And within my actions folder, I'm going to give a new file here, or create a new file, and it's going to be delete photo.js. And then within this delete photo server action, this is effectively where we are going to place the logic to delete a photo. So we're going to export an async function delete photo. And when you use a server action, I also need to put at the top of this file, use server. So let me go ahead and put use server at the top of this file. And then when this form is submitted, it's going to call this delete photo server action. So it's going to accept the form data automatically. And then within this form data, well, what data are we going to have access to? Well, we're going to have access to whatever input values that we have in here. And right now we have an input with a name of photo path, and it has this src value. So we need to get that value from our form data. And the way that we do this is saying const src is equal to form data dot get photo path. I guess I could have named the input src. That would also make plenty of sense. But we have that. But now I need to get the file path. So const file path, and then we're going to create a function called extract file path. And we're going to get our file path from our src. So now above this, let's create a function called extract file path. And it's going to take the src or URL. I guess I'm going to call it URL here. But I'm going to say, we're going to split this path into some different parts. So I'm going to say const parts is equal to URL.split, and we'll split it on, well, it should have our user uploads folder within the path. And then once we get those parts, I'm going to say if it has at least enough parts. So I'm going to say if parts.length is less than 2, then what we're going to do is console.error invalid URL format. And then we will just return, I'll just return an empty string. But if it does look like it has the correct parts, then I can say let file path equal parts at the 1 index, or at index 1. I'll say if file path dot includes, well, if it includes a question mark, then I actually want to make sure to use file path is equal to file path dot split, and we'll split it on the question mark, and then we want the 0th index. So this just kind of takes account for whether our file path includes a query parameter or not. So the question mark. And if it does, we don't want to include that. We want to split it on the question mark and then just take whatever's before the query parameter. We just want the file path. We don't want any of the search params and kind of anything before it. And then we will return, user underscore uploads plus our file path. Or you could also, do a template string here as well. So that should return the correct file path here. And then once we have the file path, then we can create our Supabase client. So let's do const cookie store, which you're probably getting used to doing this by now, is from cookies. And then we can say const Supabase is equal to create. And then we're going to create a server client, importing that from Supabase SSR. Call this function. In the first 2 arguments, let's go ahead and grab our first 2 arguments like usual. So I'm going to copy these, paste these in here. And then as a third argument, we're going to pass an object in which we're going to set up our cookies here as well. So I'm going to say cookies is a property that has a get name, and then we will return our cookie store dot get name question mark dot value. And then we'll also do a set name. And then for our setter, we will do our cookie store dot set name value dot 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 options and spread our options in. And then below this, we will do remove name options. And then we will do cookie store dot set name value and then options. So basically this is just like connecting the Supabase client to make sure that it's manipulating the cookie store that we have within our Next.js applications, because we're basically handling these sessions through cookies, because it's allowing us to create client and server clients that way. But now that we have that, we can say const error, data is equal to await Supabase dot storage dot from photos, and then we are going to call dot remove, and then we are going to remove. We can pass in array, and we need to pass in an array, but we're going to do an array of just one value, which is going to be this file path that we extracted from our form data. And then if there's an error, we will just return success as false, and you could return other things here as well. And then we will also return our error. But if that is not true, if it doesn't error, then what we need to do is just return success is true. Now that we have this should work, but we're going to have to do something else here, in which that comment should be a pretty good indicator of what we're going to have to do still. But let's go ahead and see if this works. So back to our photo, instead of just hard coding delete photo here as the action, make sure that it is delete photo, but it's from our actions / delete photo. So when they click on this delete icon, it should make a request here to this delete photo and trigger the server action in which it deletes this photo. And I'm just realizing we're not really using the data here. I think that's probably fine. I don't think we really need to use the data here. So now if we come back, let me go ahead, let's delete the watch here. So I'm going to click delete. I don't see anything happen. However, that's kind of expected right now. So let's go to Supabase buckets and let me reload. And it looks like I do indeed still see the watch image. So something went wrong here. So let's go ahead and see if I see anything in the console. Don't see anything in the console here. So let me go ahead and console.log error. And then, yeah, I'll just console log that out here. So I'm sure I'm messing something pretty easy up. And this is our delete photo, type submit. So I think it should be calling this correctly. So let's come back. I'm going to do a hard refresh and then let's click it again. And then just to make sure, let's reload. Still don't see anything. And I see error is null. So if the error is null, that's telling me that maybe our file path is incorrect. Supabase.storage.from photos.remove file path. So let's go ahead and see, is our file path maybe wrong? Let's go click delete this photo again. And we see file path. Okay, so it's user uploads, but we are missing a / right here. So I think this should actually be user uploads / file path. So now let's go. I'm going to do a hard refresh here and let's try to delete this again. So I'll delete it. Let's go back and check our bucket. I'm going to reload and we see I only have 3 photos now. And I don't believe any of them are this photo. So let me refresh this page. Let me do a hard refresh so it clears the cache. And you see I now only do have 3 photos. So as I kind of alluded to, we are deleting photos, but we need to make sure to revalidate this photos cache. So here within our backend, we can do that pretty easily. If it is not an error, then we can call revalidate path from next cache, and I can pass in / photos. And now I'm going to hard refresh again before just to reset everything. But now I'll delete this photo of myself here, and we should see it is deleted right away. So that is given us, and let me just check and verify that we only have 2 photos now, which we do. So this has indeed given us the ability to delete photos. So now the only other feature, which it is going to require a little bit of work here because we need to set up a database table and add a favorites icon and all that stuff. But the only other feature here, and isn't that an adorable little dog? The only other feature is that we are going to need to implement the favorites table and the favorite photos. So let's go ahead and get started with that now. So the first step we need to take is actually back in Supabase, to where we now want to create a table that will store the photo name for like the users' favorites. So it will basically help us keep track of, okay, did they favorite this photo or not? So what we're going to do is head over to the database column. And right now we have nothing in here because all we used was their storage bucket so far. We are going to head over to this SQL editor here. And this is where we are going to write SQL to create our table. So what we need to do is run create table, and our table name is going to be favorites. And for this table, I'm opening up parentheses. I'm going to have an ID, which is going to be serial primary key, comma, and then we're going to have a user, or actually underscore user ID, and it's going to be a UU ID, and it's going to reference auth.users, and then pass in the ID. And then we're also going to have a photo name that is just going to be of type text. So this is going to create a table favorites with a ID column, as well as a user ID that matches up with an authenticated user. And then it's also going to have a photo name where we're going to store our favorite photos. So now I'm going to go ahead and click run. And I see syntax error at or near photo name. And then all I did there was click debug with Supabase AI. And it looks like I used too many capitals. So instead of capital create table, it should just be create table. So I'm going to accept this addition. And then I'm going to remove what we previously had. So basically just convert everything to lowercase. And I think we had everything correct. So now I'm going to run this. And it says success. No rows returned. And if I go to my database, I now see I have a favorites table. But we still have to add policies to this table. So let's go ahead and do that. So we can remove this. We've already created that. But now let's go ahead and do create. And then let's do policy. And then we'll call this policy insert favorites, and I'll do on favorites for insert with check, and then it will be auth.uid. Calling that is equal to user underscore ID. So if the auth ID matches the user ID, they can insert into the favorites table. And then we're also going to make a very similar policy. So I'm going to copy line 4 here, paste it down here. But this policy is going to be select favorites. So I'm going to change this to select favorites. And it's going to be on favorites. And then it's going to be for select. And instead of with check, it's going to be using. And then it's going to stay auth.uid is equal to user ID. And then we'll do this one more time because we want to allow them to insert, select, as well as delete. So we're going to create another policy, but it's going to be called delete favorites, on favorites, and then it's going to be for delete, and then using auth.uid is equal to user ID. So let's go ahead and run these. And then I think I'm getting this error here because I need to actually end these statements here like so. And then let's run that. And then I see success. Okay, so I now believe we have successfully, although we'll find out when we give this a try, created our favorites table. So now with this in place, what we need to do is head back to VS Code, and we should have our database now set up so we can indeed create our kind of favorite photos here. So we're going to go ahead and within our photo component, so let's go to our photo component, we're going to add a form here. And it's going to be pretty similar to our delete photo form, but instead of deleting a photo, we're now going to use a server action that is either going to add or remove a photo from favorites. So the way that we're going to do this, and actually, let me think about this. So before we do that, let's actually check out our photo grid here, because we'll have to adjust this slightly. So for this photo grid, we're going to use this both on our favorites page as well as our photos page. So let's now accept a prop, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, where it's going to say favorites, and then I'm going to default it to false. And instead of, so I have our photo objects here, but now I want to say, we'll say const favorite photo names, and that set that equal to await fetch favorite photos, and we'll also pass the user in here. And now we'll get the favorite photos names. And if this is supposed to be rendered within our favorites page, we will then filter these photo objects for the favorites or not, depending on if it's favorites. So let's go ahead and now create our fetch favorite photos function, and we'll do it just right here. So this is going to be an async function called fetch favorite photos. It's going to take a user, and what we're going to do here is we already have our Supabase server client. So we can just say const data comma error is equal to await, and then we will say Supabase server, and then we're going to get dot from, and we're going to access our favorites table, and then we are going to dot select the photo name from this table. And then we're going to make sure we're only selecting the favorite photos in which the user ID is equal to our user.id. And then if there is an error, we will console.error, and I'll say error fetching favorites, and then we'll console log the error, and then we'll just return an empty array. But if that's not true, then we want to return our data.map. We're going to map over our data. We're going to take a favorite photo and then just return a favorite.photo name. So we're basically going to map over our favorite photos and just return an array of all of our favorite photo names. So theoretically, at this point, we should have all of our favorite photos. And then once we have that, then what we can do is just say, we can say const photos with favorites is equal to photo objects.map, and then we'll accept a photo. And then we will return, we will map in our photo, and then we want to adjust an is favorited property. And this will allow us to tell whether a photo has been favorited or not. So then we'll say favorite photo names dot includes photo dot photo name. So we're basically just adjusting this photo objects array by adding whether a photo is favorited or not. And I meant to put is favorited here. So we're just adjusting this very slightly to basically have a flag, a true or false Boolean, on whether a photo has been favorited. And then here, we can say about const displayed photos is equal to favorites. If we are in our favorites page, then we are only going to show the photos with favorites. So we're going to show photos with favorites dot filter, and then we are going to filter the photo if it is photo dot is favorited. So we're basically saying, are we rendering this photo grid within our favorites page? If yes, then just return our photos with favorites, but we're going to filter that, in which we're only going to include photos that have been favorited. And if that is not true, and let's maybe I'll move this to a separate line here. If that is not true, then what we're going to do is we're just going to keep it as photos with favorites. And then what we're going to return, instead of our photo objects, we'll just return our displayed photos. And then within our photo component, we'll also pass a prop that says is favorited, and we'll do photo.isFavorited. So at this point, theoretically, we've retrieved all of our favorite photos from our favorites database, and we have kind of filtered this photo grid function to where if it is in our favorites page, we pass this favorites as true. If we do that, then the displayed photos are only going to be photos that have been favorited. They have an is favorited flag, which we will set if the photo actually has been favorited here. So with this in place, now when we render a photo component, we know whether the photo has been favorited or not. So let's go ahead and head back into our photo component. And you see we have this is favorited right here. And we also pass the photo name. Let's make sure. So I do pass the photo name. So now that we have this in place, we can create the form for adding a photo to favorites or removing it from favorites. So what we're going to do is let's create another form here. And the action is eventually going to be a server action to where I go add or remove from favorites. And then we're also going to add a class name to this. So let me move this to the line below, and I'm going to copy and paste a class name that I have already created here. So you can, of course, do the same. And then within this form, the information that we're going to need in our server action are going to include the photo name, because that's what's going to allow us to add or remove that photo name from our database. And we're going to have to know whether that photo has already been favorited or not. Because if the photo has been favorited, then we're going to remove it from our database. If the photo has not been favorited yet, then we're going to add it to our favorites database. So to do this, we're going to add two different input, and both of them are going to be of type hidden. But one is going to have a name, and that is going to be the photo name. And the value is, of course, going to be the photo name. And then I'm going to do Option Shift down arrow, and it's going to be another hidden input, but the name this time is going to be whether it has been favorited or not. So it's going to be is favorited, and the value is, of course, going to be is favorited. We're going to render a button in which it's going to have a type is equal to submit. And then I'm going to move this to the next line, because we're also going to put a class name on this button, which you can, of course, copy and paste as well from my finished project. And then what we're going to render here is if the photo is favorited, we want to render like a filled in heart. But if it's not favorited, then just the outline of a heart. So they can like heart a photo. So we'll do a ternary operator to where is favorited question mark, then render out the favorite icon from material UI. But if that is not true, then render out the favorite border icon from material UI. And then with this in place, let's head back to our application, and let me do a hard refresh here on this page. And now we do indeed see I have these little heart icons. So now we need to implement the server action to where when they heart this photo, which, come on, look at this little guy. Who wouldn't heart this photo? This dog's name is Bentley, and my girlfriend loves dressing him up for Halloween. But when they heart this, we should make a request to our database to then save this photo within the favorites table. And then the heart should get filled in, but then they should also be able to unheart this photo. So with that, let's head back, and we need to now create this add or remove from favorites server action. So let's go ahead and open our actions folder. I'm going to do a new file, and I'm going to say add or remove from favorites.js. And for this, we need to use server at the top because this is a server action. And then we'll export an async function called add or remove from favorites. And then it's going to accept form data. And then we're going to need to get the photo name and whether it is favorited or not. So I'll say const photo name is equal to form data dot get, and then we will get the photo name. And then I want to say const is favorited is equal to form data dot get, and it's going to be is favorited, not favorites. I guarantee I have a typo in here somewhere to where this isn't going to work right off the bat. And then we need to create our client here again, but I think it's just going to be the same as what we did here. So I'm going to copy from our other server action, come back, and I'm going to paste this in here, but make sure you import cookies here from next headers, and make sure you also import create server client from Supabase SSR. And I think with that is all we need to do to set up our Supabase client. So of course you could add another file to this utils folder, and this one could be Supabase server action client. And then you could create this client, you could export and just use it in both of these server actions. That would probably be the most appropriate thing to do, or the most consistent, scalable thing to do here. But just want you to know that you don't have to put it in this utils folder and export it. Like, we can just keep redefining it as we please here. Now that we have our Supabase client here, we want to get our currently authenticated user. So I can say const data : user. So destructuring the user like we have done is going to be await Supabase .auth .get user, and then make sure we call that function. And then we can say same thing that we've done before. If we don't have a user, we can return success is false, error is user is not authenticated. So we'll do an early return there. But now we can assume that we have an authenticated user. So now we need to access our database and either add to favorites or remove to favorites. So we can just do if is favorites. Wait, did I accidentally say is favorites? Oh, it should be is favorited. I totally called it that I was going to make a typo. I probably still have more. So if is favorited, now what we're going to get returned here is actually a string, a true or false string on whether it's favorited or not. So it's not just going to be a Boolean. So we can't just do this, because even if it was a string that says false, that is truthy in JavaScript. It will not automatically coerce that to a Boolean. So we need to say if is favorited is equal to true. If that is the case, then we need to remove this from favorites. So we'll say const error is equal to Supabase, and then we will say dot from not form favorites, and then we will call dot delete and call that. But we only want to delete a match of our user underscore ID is our user.id. And then the photo name is equal to, well, actually it should be the photo underscore name, the name in our database, is equal to our photo name. So this is saying if it's already favorited, then delete it from favorites. So from our favorites table, delete it, but only the photo that matches our user ID as well as the photo name. But then if we have an error, let's just go ahead and return success is false, and then we'll return our error message. But if it's not favorited, then we have to do like a pretty similar thing, but adding a photo to our favorites. So we can now say const error is equal to await Supabase, and then it's going to be dot from favorites again. So dot from favorites. And then we're going to do dot insert. And then we are going to call this insert function. We're going to pass in an array. And within this array, we want to pass in an object in which the user ID is equal to our user.id. And then the photo underscore name is equal to our photo name. And then we can also do just what we did earlier. So I'm going to copy if error, and then we will paste that down here, although I want it down here, and then return, and then delete it again because it messed up my formatting. So this should finish off this statement. But now what we're going to have to do is the same thing that we've done earlier. So we're also going to want to revalidate our photos page now if they click on favorites or not. Because like I showed you earlier with like deleting a photo, if we don't revalidate the page, it's not going to get updated. So we need to make sure to do that again here. So, well, we need to revalidate our photos page, but we are also going to create a page for our favorites so they can only see their favorited photos. So for this page, let me option shift down arrow. Let's also make sure we revalidate that page as well. And then once we revalidate those two pages, we'll just return success is true. So this should have us all set up successfully here. Now, one other thing that we're going to have to do is when we actually delete a photo, we're also going to want to revalidate the favorites page as well. So we don't see like stale data in our favorites page after deleting a photo. So that was in the delete photo server action. I just added that revalidate path, just like we added here. And let me make sure that's imported, and it is. So theoretically, this should work. But now let's, instead of hard coding this, let's set the action to be our add or remove from favorites function and import that into this file, as you can see right here. So now when we render out this photo, we should be able to see, we should make this request, and let me save this. And in this page, we should see our is favorited state if we set everything up correctly, which we kind of did a lot there. So it's kind of hard to say whether this is going to work or not. But hey, the page didn't break right now. So let me do a hard refresh here. And we still have our page, which is always good. But now let's try the moment of truth. All right, here we go. I've clicked on the photo, and you do see the heart gets filled in here, which means that I don't think we actually messed anything up. But let's go back to our database. And then after refreshing this, I see it has one row in it, meaning it looks like it added it to my favorites table. And now if we come back here and I click heart on my other photo, we see this heart gets filled in. And now if I come back, we have 2 in my favorites table. So it looks like we are successfully adding them to our table. But now let's try the reverse. Let's try to go ahead and unheart this. So I'll unheart this. And it doesn't seem to work here. So let's go ahead and debug this real quick. So it didn't successfully remove them from our favorites table. So let me see. Let's just like within this function, let's console.log. Maybe I'll console.log is favorited. And then we'll see if I access this here, we have the photo name is our photo name. The user underscore ID is the user ID from our favorites table. So it successfully added them here. So maybe I'll console.log the error as well. So let me just refresh this to make sure it's still hearted. So it is indeed still hearted. So let me click unheart, and it doesn't work as we expect. But now I see is favorited is true. So it should enter this block, and then the error is undefined here. So it does enter this block, and it does not return an error, but it also doesn't look like it's correctly working. So maybe the photo name is wrong. Let's look for photo name here and see what that gets console logged at. So let's click this, come back, and I think that this looks correct here as well. So I've come back here to Supabase, and looking at the data in this table, I see the photo name here, which, looks to me like it exactly matches up with the photo name here. So I'm not entirely sure. Now I'm getting a warning. So I'm going to enable row level security, and then I'm going to click enable row level security here and click confirm. I don't really think that this is going to make a difference, but let me see delete favorites, and then make sure that this is for authenticated users. And then let me save this. And let's actually just do these for all of these, although it was working for adding a user. But I just want to adjust these to make sure that everything looks exactly, how it should be here. So I don't think that was the issue, but let me come back here. Let me refresh this, and let me go ahead and unheart this. And yeah, it doesn't seem like it really made a difference there, which, makes sense. I didn't really think that would be the culprit here. So I'm going to console.log my user as well here. So I'll do console.log user, but I already know my photo name and my is favorited looks good. And I think my user should be good as well here, but let's just go back, click on this and see. And yeah, I have a authenticated user that has the correct ID here as well. So this is weird. Let me see. Let's get return data, and then let's maybe console.log data instead and see if that gives me any more information here. And data is undefined. That's not making a ton of sense. However, I may see an issue here. So I forgot to await Supabase here. So there's a chance that is actually the issue. So let's do this again. Let's unheart it. And I see heart just goes to an outlined heart. And I see data is null, which is what I expected. And we are indeed good. So you guys probably saw that all along here. I've tried a bunch of different things, but we got it sorted out. You kind of see my process for going through and actually figuring out what's actually the culprit and what's going on here. So with that, that's pretty cool. We added our table, and now we can add and remove photos from our favorite. So hopefully we could still upload a photo here, and let's go with, this picture. We'll open this up, and then maybe we'll do one more, and we'll do one of these watches. Let's maybe go with, this one, and then we still can upload them. And then let me heart a couple of the photos. And we have those hearted. So now what we want to do is basically add the ability to go to favorite photos here. So we'll add a little bit of navigation, and then they can just see these two favorited photos, and we should have most kind of functionality working here. So let's go ahead and head back to let's first add, let's add the navigation first. I was kind of debating what I want to do there, but let's add our nav.jsx. And then within this nav, what we're going to do is we're basically just going to export a default function called nav. And then we're just going to return, well, I'm going to return a nav element. And then within that, I'm going to return an unordered list and then an li. And then within this li, I'm going to render out a link from next link, in which the href is going to be, this one's going to just navigate to / photos. And then I'm going to add some class names here in a second. And then I'm going to close this. And then I'm just going to say that this is for photos. And then I'm going to copy the li and paste it below. So copy, paste, but then this time it's going to be favorites. And then it's going to link to favorites. And then I'm going to add my styles now. So this is just going to add a little navigation here for us. And then within our photos page, let's go ahead and add our navigation. So let's go to photos page.js. And then here is where we're going to add the nav component like so. And then we're also going to want to add a page for our favorites page. So let's go ahead and within our at folder, let's create a new page. I'm going to call this favorites. And then within favorites, let's create a page.jsx. And then let's copy the photos page. So I'm going to just copy my photos page. And then I'm going to paste it in to my favorites page. But we're not going to have our photo uploader anymore. So I'm going to get rid of that component and we can remove the import. And I can also rename this to favorites. We are still going to have the nav. We are no longer going to call this photos, but we're going to call it favorites. And then for our photo grid, we're actually going to send the prop favorites to equal true. So now our photo grid, if we did everything correctly, which we haven't tested yet, and as you've seen, errors come up in development. But we should now filter this for only the photos that have been favorited if we go, or if we pass this favorites prop as true, which we did do right here. So with all of this in place, I should now see photos and favorites. So if I click on favorites, it should navigate me to my favorites page, and it shows me my only 2 favorited photos. And let me unfavorite the picture of me. And you see, it changes it here. And then is the picture of me unfavorited over here? It is indeed unfavorited. And then if I add, this one to favorites and this one to favorites, and then go check out favorites, ooh, we see that it's not updated. So what I need to do here is in my, where are we at? In our add or remove from favorites. Oh, for revalidate path, I passed in revalidate. I need to pass in favorites here. So let me come back and okay, we have it here. But now if I go to photos and I heart this and then go to favorites, we should have the 4 photos. And then, if let's get rid of the watch and the photo of me and then go back to favorites, we see both of those. And then let's come back to photos. What happens if I delete this photo here? So it deletes and we no longer see it within our favorites either because we made sure to update that as well when deleting a photo. So this looks pretty good, but let's also make sure that, well, for one, I see one little thing. Let's go to our layout.js in our root and change the title to photo store. And then I'm just going to remove the description here. So that changes the little icon that we see up at the top here. So let me sign out and then let me sign in with a different account. And then I shouldn't see any photos in this account, which I don't. But let's upload a couple here. So let me go ahead and, I don't know, maybe this one. And we see the Samaritan, the white background. I would probably want to edit this photo a little bit because it makes those a little bit impossible to read, but I'll leave that as an exercise to the viewer. But we'll just add these two photos, and then I'll heart this photo of me and my dog, and then I'll go to favorites, and I see this one in favorites, go back to photos, I'll sign out, and now I'll sign into my other account, and we should see some different photos here, and we do. So I don't see the Samaritan, I don't see the photo of me, we see the different photos. So it looks like it's working, it's separating our users, it's uploading photos to storage like we see here, it's deleting them, it's adding them to the favorites, deleting them from favorites, and it looks like everything is working correctly here, which is pretty awesome. So the very last step here is deploying this application. So what we're going to do is I'm going to head over to GitHub. So I'm here at my GitHub. If you don't have a GitHub, I would recommend signing up for one. If you're getting into development, I think GitHub is a great thing for you to have, but I'm going to click this plus icon here. I'm going to do new repository. I'll name it photo store. It'll be public, and then I'll create this repository. I'm going to copy this get remote add origin, this URL here, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to open this other terminal. I'm going to do git add, git commit, add project. Generally, you would want to, commit this stuff as we go rather than adding 2,000 lines of code all in one, but we will clear this. And then I'll do get remote add origin. I'll paste what we copied from GitHub, and I'll git push. We will get an error here, but then it will give us the correct thing that we need to do. Git push set upstream origin. So I'll copy this, I'll paste it here, and we now should be able to go back to GitHub, refresh this page, and I should see my added project here. So now we're going to deploy this using Vercel. So let's head over to Vercel. So I'm just at vercel.com and I'm at the dashboard page. If you don't have a Vercel account, I would recommend that you go create one. It's absolutely free and it's super easy to do. So go create a free Vercel account at vercel.com and then go to your overview page. And then once there, you should be able to go add new and then click project. Now, you can import a Git repository. If you don't see your Git repositories, you might need to link your GitHub account to Vercel, which there should be like a button here for you to do that. And then you'll be able to just very easily link those two accounts. But since I've already done that, I see my photo store application right here. So I'm going to click import. And then there's just a couple of other things that we need to do. So one of those is adding environment variables. So I'm going to come back. Let's come to my .env file, and I'm going to copy this next public Supabase URL, and then I'm going to paste it in here as a key, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to copy my actual key here, which I am going to delete after I finish this project, and I'm going to add this here. And then we are also going to copy this other key, come back, paste it here. Coming over here, copy this entire key. Whoops. Let me see if I can get this. This entire key, copy that, come back, paste it in here, click add. And then now I'm going to click deploy. Although I think there's one other thing that we'll have to change here. So let's go back to Supabase and let's go to project settings. And I think I need to redo our site URL. Let's click on authentication over here. And then I believe we need to update. So my email templates is my site URL, which I think I need to adjust slightly. So URL configuration. Right now it is localhost 3000, but it should actually be, and I actually got an error while deploying here. So what I think this build error is coming from is this code right here. we are trying to create this server client, but it's just in just like a JavaScript file. We're not necessarily in a server context here. So let me see where we all use this. So let me search for Supabase server client. And I mean, it looks like we only use this in one area in our photo grid. So let's actually just, I'm going to copy this right here, this create server client, and then let's it over to our photo grid. And then instead of using it here, well, I actually call it here as well. Let's go ahead and we will create this right here. So I'll say const Supabase server, and that is equal to create server client. So let me call this function. And this should now create this server client here. But then I'm going to remove that. And let me view Explorer here instead. And now I need to have Supabase server passed in to these functions here. So I'm going to pass in Supabase server to all of these here. And so that's to all these three functions. So now I need to, when I fetch these, I need to pass in my Supabase server, same thing here, and same thing here. And then I think I can just get rid of this file. So let me delete it. And I should have everything now appropriately configured. So let me go ahead and save this. I'm going to clear, and let's run npm run build again and see if I get the same build error. And I actually get an error, cookie store is not defined from photos page.js. So let me go and, oh, I think I know what I did. Let's go back to photo grid, and I actually didn't get our cookie store. So I'll say const cookie store is equal to calling our cookies function from next headers. So now let's try to run this again. npm run build, and it does indeed look like it successfully built this now. So that was the issue we were running into. So I'm going to run git add, git commit, fix, issue with server client, and then I'm going to push this, and it should automatically try to rebuild within Vercel. So let me come back, and I'm going to come back to just come back. And it now looks like I went to our photo store app, and it looks like it is now building based on the commit fix issue with server client. So let's go ahead and see if this does indeed actually build. And then once it gives us a site URL, I think we need to swap it right here. Let's come back to Vercel, and we'll give it a second to hopefully successfully build. And it looks like the status is ready. And I think this just gave me a site URL, but let me click on this, and hey, welcome to Photo Store. So I believe I need to copy this URL that it gave us and then make that our site URL. And I will then go ahead and save that. Although I don't know if I need this trailing slash. I'm not sure why it pasted it in there. Let me actually delete that and then save that. So I just removed the forward slash. So let's come back here, and then I should be able to still sign in with my users that we already created. So I'm going to sign in. It signs me in, which is very good news. I have favorites, photos. I can click on a photo here, and I can see cute little Bentley. I can click on this photo. I can see not so cute me. I can favorite this Rolex, and we see the heart gets filled in, and I can come to favorites, and we see I have my 2 favorited photos. I come back and let me go ahead and I'll delete the Rolex, come back, deleted it, come back to favorites. It's just the one favorite now. Come back to photos. Let's upload another photo. Me and my dog uploading. And then I should see my photo come in, and I do. So it looks like everything is now working on our deployed application. So I know we ran into some bumps there, but thank you so much for tuning in. I'm sure you learned a lot about storage and buckets and databases and adding policies and authentication. We did a lot of stuff, and really the stuff you learned in this tutorial, you can apply it to so many other areas of application. So, this, if I were you, I would want, if you were going to include this in like a portfolio project, I would add some stuff to this. So, maybe when they click on a photo here, maybe it pops up a carousel and they can like do a carousel through these photos. Or maybe you add a couple more pages to where, I don't know, the user could do some other stuff. Like, I think you're super close here, but if you just added a little bit and extended this a little further and actually did some of your own stuff based on what you learned here today, I think you can make this into such a cool portfolio application, which hopefully helps you, learn more stuff as well as like get a job, hopefully, if you're in that position. So thank you so much for tuning into this. I really, really appreciate it. I'll see you in that next one.